Ahoy there, friends, and welcome in. Today we have, in continuing the pattern from yesterday, as I take my week off and recover from whatever the hell I decided to catch out in public. Which, by the way, if you're sick, please just stay home if you can. Get your stuff delivered from the grocery store if you can. Don't go walking around Walmart, please. If you're sick, just if you can, just stay home. Anyways. Today we have 30 of some of my favorite Glitch in the Matrix stories. Now, again, this is not all encompassing. This is not everything I've enjoyed. This is just 30 stories that stuck out to me as I scrolled through my list of stories I've read. Will this be the same as your list of favorite stories? Probably not. Is this every single Glitch story I've ever read that I absolutely love? No, that's not a possible thing for me to actually give you, as I've done, 284 episodes worth of Glitch stories. This, again, is just a collection of stories I've read, stood out, and I enjoyed. So, hopefully you enjoy them. If you do, awesome. If not, see you again soon. Well said, friends. Enjoy the glitchy goodness, and I'm going back to bed. When I was younger, I used to be a major proponent of taking road trips. And I used to love getting out on the open road. As strange as it is, I love the smell of hot asphalt. That rubbery burning smell, something about it makes me want to drive 1,000 miles to a location that I've never been to. Maybe it's something about the freedom of the highways, but I've taken countless trips over the years to places that most people have never heard of. And I recommend everyone take a cross-country trip at least once in their life. That said, there is one trip, one of those cross-country trips, that actually haunts me. I think it was some kind of glitch in the Matrix, but I really don't know. I'm submitting this as a glitch story because I have zero explanation otherwise. This was in the early 90s. I was in my early 20s, and I was on a solo road trip from east to west here in the States. I'd pack my car with all my essentials, say my goodbyes to people that mattered, and I would set off on adventure, stopping and making calls at payphones along the way. The first couple days of the trip were uneventful. I was just going down the highway with my music, some truck stop food, and the joy of freedom. On the third day, though, is when things took a bit of a strange turn. I was driving down a 2-lane highway, a bit of a desolate stretch of road in the middle of nowhere. The sun was in the middle of the sky, making the shadows stretch across the landscapes, and making the air feel a bit heavier. I had been on a pretty empty stretch of road, and I hadn't seen another car or sign of life for a while. That's when I saw what looked like a person standing on the side of the road. He was tall, thin, had long hair flowing in the wind. He almost looked like a stereotypical hippie. He wasn't wearing vivid colors or anything like that. He just looked a bit lanky, had big round glasses and long dark hair that was tied back. He had his thumb out like he was trying to hitchhike. I slowed down thinking that I could stop for him, but something about the whole situation gave me a weird vibe. Something told me to keep driving and that he would be fine, and that I should not stop. So I kept going. As I drove on, I glanced in the rearview mirror and saw him continuing his travels on foot. He didn't seem upset that I didn't stop, so I wasn't going to feel bad about it. After about an hour, though, I was confused to see another hitchhiker. Not just another hitchhiker, but the same hitchhiker. It was the same guy standing there with the same bag and the same outstretched thumb. He had the same long hair that was tied back and same round glasses. Same overall look. I couldn't believe my eyes. It had to be a coincidence. There was no way that the guy an hour back had gotten ahead of me. I hadn't stopped or slowed down, and I was going something like 70 miles per hour at this point. For him to have gotten ahead of me, he would have had to have been walking faster than 70 miles per hour. Or teleported. Obviously, this didn't help my creepy feelings about him, but I ignored it, thinking that I was just going crazy. Until I saw him again, about another hour later. I know that sounds crazy, trust me, but I saw another man with the same tied back hair, the same brown shawl, the same lanky structure, and same outstretched thumb. At this point, I was freaking out, thinking that I was either losing it, or that I was at the butt end of the most well-thought-out prank in the world. Was this seriously a bunch of similar-looking guys dispersed along the highway at hour intervals? Just standing there to mess with people and making them think that they're seeing things? At this point, I decided that I needed to go ahead and get off the highway, and stop to get something to eat. Maybe I was just hungry, and my brain was doing something stupid. I went for about 20 more minutes down the highway, making sure that there was no way that this man could catch up to me if I stopped. I pulled off, went to a Sonic's, and got a burger for dinner. I sat there, ate my food, and then decided to get back out onto the road. I pulled out of the parking lot, back onto the road that led to the highway, and at the next corner, who else would I see but that same man? This time he was at an intersection, not on the side of the highway, and he was just standing there with his bony thumb outstretched. This time I stopped. Seeing this guy 4 times, there had to be some level of fate between the two of us, right? There had to be something that was happening that I could not understand, and we were supposed to meet. My curiosity had taken over my fears, so I just said that I would bite the bullet and confront him. I pulled up beside him, rolled the window down, and asked him if he was okay, or if he needed a ride. He nodded at me and walked over to my car, and put his hands on the open window looking in. The whole time he walked up and looked around, he had the goofiest smile on his face, like he was the happiest he had ever been. After a couple seconds of this, I guess you could call it analysis, he looked at me and said, "What's your name, bruh?" I told him that my name was Gabriel, but that he could call me Gabe, if he wanted, and he just kept his smile and nodded slowly. After a few more seconds of terribly awkward silence, he looked back at me and said, "You know what, brother? I appreciate it, but I think I'll take the next one." His voice turned a bit cold, and he pushed himself away from my car, telling me to have safe travels. I stared at him for a moment, but then told him to have a good day, and started driving off. It was an incredibly awkward moment, and a conversation that I will remember for the rest of my life. The rest of the trip passed without incident, and I didn't see that man again. It was almost as if I needed to talk to him, like our simulation was telling me that, in order for me to continue, I needed to meet this random dude that I had seen hitchhiking in 4 different locations. And when I finally met him, he stopped spawning in, and I was allowed to move forward. It was a bit terrifying, not going to lie, but nothing really happened outside of that weird conversation. I don't know if he was some kind of ghost or glitch that I had to address, or if it was all in my head and it was just 4 guys that looked identical. Like I mentioned, I guess it could have been a prank, but if so, that was the most epically coordinated prank to have ever happened, and there was no payoff for literally any of them. No matter what it was weird. And hopefully you and your listeners enjoy it. I have one of those dumb glitches that was really neat for me at the time, but in the grand scheme of things, doesn't really mean much to the world, nor should it. It's such a boring and mundane thing that there's a million possible explanations, but none of them really seem to fit or work in this specific case. So, I'm going to say that it was a glitch and move on from there. About a week ago, it was my birthday, but I'm well beyond the age of getting a cake and having people over. The day of, while my wife and I were at the store, I saw these ice cream cones that were filled with fudge and were on a cone that was marked as being made of Kit Kat wafers. I love Kit Kats, so I said, hey, let's just get those instead of a container of ice cream. That way we can enjoy them for a few days. My wife agreed, we grabbed them, and we bought them. After we ate, we both were pretty antsy to get at the cones, which sounds kind of dumb as I type it out. But we opened the box and were sorting through the two flavors. As I was sorting them, I noticed that there was one missing. There were supposed to be 8 cones total, 4 double chocolate, and 4 vanilla with fudge in them. I dumped them on the counter and counted, and sure enough, there were only 7 there. 4 chocolate, but only 3 with the fudge. I know that this isn't a common thing to happen, but it does happen. Sometimes packages get messed up when they ship, so whatever. It is what it is. My wife mentioned that we could always take them back, but at this point, we had opened it, and it would look like we were just trying to get a freebie after eating one of the cones. So I said that it was fine. We'd had our ice cream, enjoyed it, and moved on with life. After a few days, we had each had 3 apiece, leaving just the 1 extra. The box was sitting in the freezer, and my wife had grabbed it, making a comment about how there was only 1 left. It was a chocolate one, no fudge, just basic chocolate. And I didn't much care for that flavor, so I mentioned that she could have it. I will say that, at this point, I did not watch what she did in the kitchen, but I saw her walk into the living room with the ice cream cone in hand. She came in, sat down, and was 100% without a doubt eating one of the cones, and it was the last chocolate one. I then made a dumb comment about how, if they hadn't packaged them wrong, I would be enjoying my last cone with her as well. She laughed, made a joke at me being whiny, and that was that. About 5 minutes or so later, I got up and went into the kitchen to get some ice for a glass of water, and when I opened the freezer, there was the box of the ice cream cones sitting on the bottom shelf. I was a slight bit annoyed, thinking that she had just left the empty box in the freezer. So, I grabbed it to make a passive-aggressive statement, and, to my surprise, when I did, it wasn't empty. I opened it and looked inside, and there was a single cone in the box. Even more surprising was that it was the one with the fudge. Like, it was the one that was missing. I grabbed it and walked toward the living room, and my wife saw the cone and asked where the hell it came from. I asked her if it was in the box when she got hers, and she said no, that she had pulled the box out and tossed it into the recycling bin. I looked back. There was no box in the bin, just the one in my hand. We both kind of stood there for a moment, and after a few seconds, I tossed the box into the bin and went into the living room with my cone, and sat there just kind of staring at it. I don't think either of us knew what exactly to say or think about this, because it really didn't make sense. I mentioned that my birthday was for sure 3 days prior to this, and I had a fudge cone that night. She had chocolate. The next day we swapped flavors, and that was when I realized I didn't like the chocolate one as much. Then, yesterday, I'd had the last vanilla fudge one, and she had chocolate, leaving just that last chocolate one in the box. We both remembered that there was for sure one missing on the first day that we got it, that there were 7 and not 8 in the box. We both remember the same set of events where we had been eating one a day up to this day, which would have ended on that day with the one that she was eating. And yet here we were, staring at the now replaced fudge cone. I know that getting an extra ice cream cone from the Matrix may sound boring, but it was really weird, because we both remember the exact same thing, and the exact same order of events. This cone should not exist, and yet it does. I don't think that we misremembered, because it was exactly 4 days of us having the cones, so it would math out correctly. I don't think she would have lied about there not being one left, because there'd be nothing to gain with that, really. And I know for a fact that she didn't go out to get a box of them to replace the missing one, because she would have had to have gotten rid of 7 other ones just to pull this off. And, to the best of my knowledge, you can't buy these individually. So, in the end, I had my last fudge cone, and I enjoyed every second of it, because it was good. I have no idea where it came from, how it got there, or why it was even missing in the first place, but the Matrix gave it back. And I guess that's just the mystery that is our simulation. Hi everyone, my name is Aaron. I'm from Los Angeles, California. I have a story that happened to me 12/30/2023, recently, in Big Bear, California. Here is my recount in detail of what happened to me and the geography of the land. I went on a day trip with 2 of my friends to Big Bear Lake, California, to hang out and snowboard. It was a regular beautiful day. We left to Big Bear around 5 a.m., got up to the mountain and to the summits to the park around 7:30 a.m. We got redirected to park down the road. A couple of miles to a parking lot, we followed the signs and made it to a huge gravel lot. No buildings around, just porta potties, and the area that the trams pick everyone up at to head up to the Bear summit. When we entered the lot and parked, we were facing away from the mountain towards the direction of the lake. The tail of the truck was facing the mountain summit. Remember this later on in the story. We got on the tram and went up to the mountain for a day of snowboarding and hanging out. It was a great day. It was beautiful, and we got lucky that it was snowing. I stayed in the bar area waiting for my 2 friends to come down after snowboarding. Both of my friends came down to join me in the bar. We hung out and just talked. As I was sitting in my stool, a nice older lady came up to me and asked if she could sit there since there were no other seats and the place was packed. I gave her my friend's seat and she hung out with me and my friends while her kids were up on the mountain snowboarding. It was around 3 p.m., and one of my friends went back up the mountain to do some more snowboarding. He only had an hour left before his lift ticket ran out at 4 p.m. Me and my friend and the lady are sitting, talking for a good hour, with her kids and her. It was around 3:15 and she says that she has to go. I got sad inside that she had to leave as I was having a really nice time just chatting. This is where it happens. As she and her kid are walking out of the bar and into the blizzard snow outside, me and the lady both look at each other for a moment as I was sitting on the stool, and said goodbye silently to each other. I looked into her eyes and boom, I instantly went from sitting on a stool in a bar to an empty gravel parking lot at nighttime. I physically felt the shift, and I had to catch myself from falling because I was in a sitting position and then landing in a parking lot. All I heard was the gravel smashing under my feet as if I fell out of nowhere. I instantly had my hand up to catch my balance and looked forward. Both of my friends were about 10 feet in front of me walking to the truck. The truck was in a different location, now facing the mountain's summit. I could see the lights that light up the mountain. I was so in shock that I couldn't believe it, and I started yelling at my friends that this isn't the right lot, that we didn't park here so close to the bottom of the mountain. They instantly got mad at me and started to argue, saying, "Aaron, this is the lot we parked at. It's the only lot." I say no, we parked far over there, away from the mountain in another lot. They were still angry with me, so I shut up and realized what had happened, and that no one would believe me, so since I couldn't ask my friends as they were packing their gear, I walked around dumbfounded. What had just happened? I asked other people in the lot if they remembered parking in this lot, and they all thought that I hit my head and was crazy. It was the worst feeling I had ever felt. I felt so alone. But wait, this is where it gets interesting. I screenshotted a pic of the map of the area. It was at 5:56 p.m. I lost about 3 hours of time, but I instantly jumped from the bar up in the mountain to the gravel lot on both feet. I knew that no one was going to believe me, so after I got back home, I went and told my father what had happened, and explained it in detail. I said that we parked in a huge empty lot with no buildings, and then ended up in a smaller lot at the base of the mountain, and the truck was now facing the mountain, and that I had been jumped to the lot from the bar, so he goes, "Well, let's Google Map it." With my luck, the Google Maps showed the huge big lot we first parked at when we got to Big Bear. Then we found the second lot that I ended up at, and there was a huge building next to it. So we had mapped it out, both lots, and the bar up at the lodge at the ski resort that we were at. He saw what I was talking about. Both lots did exist. The story happened to me had compelling evidence that something had happened. 2 days later, we both went to go look at the Google Maps of the lots and talk more about it, and that first big lot was nowhere to be found on the map. The road had changed, and there were houses next to the lake where the lots were supposed to be. Then, we found the second lot that I was shifted into, and I couldn't believe it. The second lot looked like the first lot, and the second lot merged together. They had half and half characteristics of both lots. I was pissed that now I had no evidence and my story looked crazy, because there was only one lot now. But my father was stunned and he couldn't believe it either that the other lot didn't exist anymore. It bothered me for a couple of weeks to ask my friends about what had happened up on the mountain. I finally asked one of my friends how I was when we were at the bar, because I have no memory of how I got down the mountain. He said, "Fine." I go, "You remember us talking to that lady?" He says yes. And then I say, "I was fine in my right mind, so how did we get down the mountain?" He goes, "You were fine. We were all talking and we got on the shuttle and went down the mountain to the lot." In my mind, I know for a fact that that was not me talking with my friends from the point the lady left to when I got to the lot. So it must have been another me that was taking my place with my friends, and then I was shot back into that reality of a different lot. I hope that this recount of what happened to me can help others, or help in researching why these things happen, or are going on. Did the lady that I was talking to know what was going to happen to me? Did she jump me into the lot? Because that was the last thing I saw before I was dropped into another parking lot. This is going to bother me until the day I die, because I know what happened to me. It was very personal, and I want to know where I was for 3 hours, and who was talking with my friends as me when it wasn't. Was it my doppelganger? Any information will be well received, and I hope that this finds who needs it, and I hope that this finds who it needs to, or if you travel to Big Bear, beware that time slips are happening up there. I'm going to make a trip soon to visit it all again to try to find answers. Thanks, much love, and peace to all of you. I used to work at a grocery store as a cashier, and it was a pretty boring job, but I have one story that was pretty crazy that I thought I would go ahead and share. It was a pretty normal day. I was bored out of my mind from ringing people up, taking money, cleaning the front of the store. I'm not going to say that I liked the job. It was just kind of a paycheck to me, so I didn't really pay much attention to the customers or what they looked like. We started to get busy in the late afternoon, as we always did, and I was ringing up an older woman that was very polite and talkative. I'm not very sociable. Plus, like I said, I didn't like the job, so I was keeping the small talk, well, small. She asked how I was doing, and I told her I was fine. I commented on her scarf because it was a really pretty shade of blue, and she thanked me. She mentioned some of the deals, just things like that. Standard grocery store cash register conversation. I got through her items, and I told her her total, and I even remember the exact number that she owed. It was $35.72 altogether. She handed me a 20, a 10, a 5, and a 1. So, all of the common denominations of cash. I gave her her change, and she told me to have a blessed day. I rang up the next guy in line. It was a pretty quick transaction, as it was a coworker and he was just buying stuff for his lunch. He made a comment about how busy we were, and that was that. Then, when I finished with him, I looked up at the next person in my line, and, much to my surprise, it was that same old lady from before. I grinned and asked her if she had forgotten a few things from earlier, and she kind of just stared at me and asked what I meant. I made a comment about how she had been in earlier, and she said that she had only been there for about half an hour and shopping, and that she hadn't come up to the front at all in that time. I then laughed and just mentioned that there was another lady that looked just like her, and that she honestly could have been her twin. Same coat, scarf, everything. She remarked that that was pretty crazy since she had made the scarf herself by hand, so it was one of a kind. We made similar small talk, and I just took it as, oh, it was two people that looked the same, and moved on. It wasn't really a huge deal at the time. After I rang up all of her items, I looked at the screen to tell her her total. $35.72. I laughed and told the lady that that was the same total the other lady had had, and she'd had different items. She laughed and said that it was really crazy. She then told me to have a blessed day, and we moved on. Now, that all in and of itself is weird, but it got weirder. About 2 hours later, we had slowed down, but were still fairly busy, and I looked up to greet the next customer in line. And, sure enough, it was the same old lady. Same face, same coat, same bright blue scarf. This time, I didn't say anything to her about looking like the other two. I kind of thought that maybe she was pranking me or something, so I figured I would make small talk and see if she cracked. I told her that I really liked her scarf. She thanked me, and I then asked her if she had made it. She said that she did, and even started in on how complicated it was to knit the whole thing, because the pattern that she'd had was a bit off. I nodded and kept the small talk going, and at the end of ringing her items up, I didn't even look at the screen at all. I turned toward her, and I decided that I would just make a joke about how, without looking at the total, I could tell her that she owed $35.72. She glanced behind me at the screen and laughed, asking how I did that. I laughed, but then looked and was blown away at the fact that I was correct. It was at that point that I decided that this wasn't a prank, and that something in reality had broken. I told her that she was the third lady with the same blue scarf to come through with the exact same total over the last few hours. She laughed at me and thought that I was joking. I could tell that she didn't think I was being serious, so I just let it go. I took her money, and then, as if on script, she walked away and told me to have a blessed day. I tried to make sense of it all, but the more that I tried to rationalize it, the more confused I became. I even asked one of my coworkers if they had noticed it, but they just looked at me as if I was crazy. I still don't know what caused this glitch in the Matrix or what it all means, but I know that it was the weirdest experience of my time at that store. And it's something that I'll honestly never forget. Sometimes the world around us can be stranger than we think, and I guess sometimes the Matrix runs out of characters and just has to double up. I have never really been one to remember my dreams, and the ones I do remember never mean anything. They're just the really weird ones that don't do anything for me. But about 2 weeks ago, I had a strange dream that stuck with me more than normal. It was a really vivid dream about me getting home from work. I don't live too far from work, a few miles at most, so I've actually taken to riding my bike instead of driving. At least until it gets really hot. Then I'll just take the car. Anyways, in this dream I was biking home, riding in the bike lane and careful not to cause problems for the people in their cars. In this dream I was stopped at a light right next to a white Toyota Prius. I remember that very specifically. I was sitting there, just waiting for the lights to turn green, when I looked over at the Prius and noticed they had a little dog in the back seat that was staring at me. I smiled, thinking it was a cute pup, which caused me to glance back a bit and see that there was a black pickup truck coming in our direction way too fast. I look over and for a split second, I can see the driver. It's some kid, probably 17 at most, and he's staring down at his cell phone, completely oblivious to the car stopped in front of him. I'm just watching this truck barrel toward the red light, thinking that I'm about to see a wreck. But then, at the last second, this kid looks up and sees the stopped Prius and slams on his brakes. However, he doesn't just slam his brakes, he also veers. And guess which direction he veers? Right at me, in the bike lane. Right as I would have been likely killed by this truck, I woke up in a cold sweat with my heart pounding, and I felt like I was having a panic attack. The dream felt real, and the whole thing was absolutely horrifying, but I talked myself out of the stupor. It was a dream, nothing more. Like I said, I don't even remember most of them, so it didn't mean much to me at the time. That day, when I was on my way home, I started again in my normal direction, when I randomly thought about that dream. It kind of freaked me out, and I thought about the fact that I would be heading in the direction of where that dream, I guess, took place. And for some stupid reason, my brain panicked and told me to stop at the CVS near that corner to get something to drink. So I did. I decided that I would go in and get a Powerade instead of going straight home. I rode up to near that stoplight, got up over the sidewalk, and walked my bike to park it outside of the CVS. I was close enough to that light that I could see it, and something told me to look up. There, at the light, was a white Prius, just waiting for it to turn green. I got hit with this weird feeling in my stomach and looked back down the road, thinking that there was no way I would see a black truck. But when I looked, there it was. That black truck going way too fast, and the driver clearly not paying attention. I watched as he got closer and closer, and then heard the squeal of the tires as he tried to not hit the Prius and veered to the right. He clipped the Prius and smashed his truck straight into a streetlight pole on the corner. As I watched him smash his truck into the pole, I kept thinking that I would have been right there. I would have been sitting there between his truck and that light pole, had I not decided to stop at that CVS. One of the clerks ran out of the CVS to ask what had happened, as they'd probably heard the crashing. I mentioned that the truck hit the pole, and they said that they would go call the police to handle it, since it looked like a pretty bad wreck. The kid ended up needing to go to the hospital. He was pretty banged up. The lady and the dog in the Prius, and yes, it was that same dog from my dream, were shaken up, but they were all right. I stood there, honestly shaking, unable to really move from the bike rack. I ended up giving a statement to the police, explaining what I saw from where I was. Then I went in and got my Powerade, just trying to continue living like nothing had happened, like I hadn't barely missed my own demise. So, was this dream some kind of premonition, or quantum immortality where I was put in the same situation a second time? I'm struggling to move past it, but I figured asking this here would be a good idea since the comments seem to always have their own ideas. It was just crazy how detailed the dream was, and how I remembered every little step in the dream, and how, because I had that strange dream, I may have actually avoided a date with the Grim Reaper. This happened during a fairly typical work week, and honestly is an incredibly subtle but kind of creepy glitch for me. I had a routine whenever I worked in the office. Every night before work, I would prepare my lunch so that I didn't have to do it in the morning. Every night during the week, my girlfriend would head to bed, and I would head to the kitchen to get my lunch put together, and then would also go to bed. On this particular night, I made a turkey and cheese sandwich. I grabbed a small bag of chips from the cupboard, and then grabbed the last apple that we had that was sitting in the bowl. On this night, however, I wanted to go ahead and slice up the apple, because I'm not too privy on the skins. So I grabbed the cutting board, sliced it up, and cut off all the apple skins. I then tossed the slices into a Ziploc. Then I went to bed, where my girlfriend was already half asleep. The next day was normal, completely uneventful in the first half, filled with the usual hustle and bustle of work. When lunchtime came around, I locked my machine, grabbed my lunchbox from my desk drawer, and walked upstairs to the lunchroom, just to get away from my desk for a while. I went over to the same corner table that I like to sit at, and stared at my phone for a few minutes, before finally opening my box to eat my sandwich. I pulled out the sandwich, the chips, and then when I went to grab the apple, I paused. Something was off. I stared for a second, and my heart skipped a beat when it slowly clicked in my head. Instead of my carefully prepared sliced apple wedges that I had meticulously prepared the night before, sitting there in my box was a whole uncut apple. Same type, same color, but whole. I blinked for a second, thinking that either my eyes were playing tricks on me, or I was losing it. But no, there it was. A whole untouched apple, as if mocking my confusion. It was just one of those things that happened, that you can see in front of you but doesn't make any sense. At first I thought that maybe my girlfriend was messing with me. Maybe she'd swapped it out. And I texted her asking if she had, but again it clicked that the apple I cut up was the last one in the bowl. When we buy apples, we buy small bags, and we put them in the fruit bowl in the kitchen. so it wasn't like there was another apple somewhere else that she could have swapped it with. Plus, when she texted me back, she said that she had no idea what I was talking about. Honestly, I don't see any reason as to why she would lie about it. If it were a prank, she would have owned up to it. Because otherwise, what was the payoff? To this day, I seriously cannot explain how or why this happened. I half expected to find a bag of apple slices somewhere in the fridge or on my desk or something, but never did. I also checked the trash can in the kitchen when I got home from work, because, logically, it would be filled with apple peels, right? It wasn't. There wasn't a single apple peel in the can, so it was as if I had never sliced or peeled the apple. The only other logical explanation would be that someone at my work swapped the apples out. But to do that, they would have had to have waited for me to walk away from my desk, gotten into my drawer, opened my lunch bag and swapped out the apple, and then put it all back without anyone else noticing them. Plus, this would require them to know that I had brought sliced apples instead of a whole one. And it's not like I went around bragging that I had cut up an apple last night. Honestly, it's these small and inexplicable moments that remind me that there is more to our reality than meets the eyes. If nothing else, it's enough to keep you wondering what it is that's out there that is playing these little tricks on us. I honestly wasn't sure where I should put this story, the paranormal or the glitch in the Matrix, but I've decided on the latter. Because with things like ghosts and spirits, especially if it's loved ones, I feel that they still kind of adhere to the physical plane's rule to an extent. And that's not the case here. The year was 2012, so I was 17 at the time. And while some people were anticipating the end of the world in December, I remember that, my world ended in March when my grandmother passed away. It came out of nowhere for everyone. She went to take a nap and never woke up again. It's needless to say that everyone in the family was devastated, me included. I cried myself to sleep that same night and wound up having a dream about her that gave me some closure of sorts. That's a story for the paranormal side of things, so maybe I'll write that at a later date. Let's fast forward to May of the same year. I, along with my mom and sister, were living with my great-grandmother, the mother of my grandmother. The house she lived in was old, I think. I'm not 100% sure how long she lived there, but I can say that she lived there for about half of her life, until she died at the age of 83 in 2013, 1 year after the death of her only daughter. The house was small, but cozy. Its side yard was even smaller, yet just as comforting, despite how dangerous the neighborhood had gotten over the years. I sometimes liked to step outside for a bit to take in the fresh air. Decorating the area was a swinging bench, some lawn decor, and many pots and pans containing plants. One being a large clay pot containing small flowers of varying colors. And the reason for me writing this story. I will say that I wasn't sure what kind of flowers they were, just that they were small and came in yellow, white, red, and purple. I want to say that they were petunias, and why this is important to tell is because of what happened on Mother's Day. It was the first Mother's Day without my grandmother, but we still planned to make it a happy one. We're firm believers in ghosts and the paranormal, so we've collectively felt that my grandmother was still with us, and would still want us to enjoy the day. So, as I've done a couple times before, I stepped out to the side yard for a bit of fresh air, just looking around, until my eyes landed on the pot of petunias. Only most of the petunias were gone, and were replaced by tall stalks of calla lilies. I stood still and stared at the pot in bewilderment, thinking, wait, those lilies weren't there yesterday, were they? In all my 17 years of visiting my great-grandmother, I've never once seen calla lilies among her plants. I went back inside to tell my mother and sister, and they were also perplexed, as they remembered the pot being filled with petunias the day before. I don't think there was even a hint of a lily growing. While I am a believer in the fantastic side of things, I try to remain a skeptic, and think of more logical explanations first. I thought about crossbreeding and that the petunia flowers just changed into lilies, but that made zero sense for many reasons, such as the fact that petunias and lilies are from different families of flowers altogether, and such method of crossbreeding would be incredibly difficult. My second thought was that a seed or bulb was planted without us knowing. And while that could have been possible, there was one crucial reason why I didn't think this was the case either. The lilies disappeared the next day, and never grew again. At the time, we all believed that the lilies were a gift from my late grandmother, and while a part of me still thinks this now, after hearing so many Glitch in the Matrix stories, I can't help but feel that these lilies were perhaps from a different timeline. Maybe one where lilies instead of petunias were planted. Or maybe my grandmother planted them in a parallel universe as a gift for her mother. Who knows? I'm still wondering to this day. I'm even looking at the pictures we took of the pot now. The thing that gets me is that there were zero hints of the lilies growing there. I looked it up to see how long it would take for a lily to grow and bloom, and it's just not possible. It was like it popped into existence overnight before disappearing the next night. The pot, once again, contains petunias without a single sign of the lily's presence. I jumped timelines in a car accident. So, this happened when I was fresh 18. I'm 24 now, and at the time I was living in Florida with my dad and stepmom. My now husband, boyfriend at the time, was in jail with no chance of getting out. The day of the accident, I had gotten into an argument with my dad, and he told me that I had to leave the house. So the plan was that I was going to go stay at my boyfriend's parents' house until I could get on my feet. I left my dad's house in Florida, and I started on my way to Georgia. I did have this feeling saying not to go, and the signs were always there, but I just ignored them. Like when I stopped at the gas station and left my keys in the car for 2 hours. Still, those two guys who got through the window for me, bless them. They were working, doing Uber, and they stopped to help. Anyways, I was traveling back roads from Florida to Georgia. I made it to Albany when a wave of anger and sadness hit me. Maybe I knew what was about to happen. I just could not stop crying. When I noticed I passed the first stop sign at a four-way, I told myself that I had to slow down. But by the time the next four-way came, I turned to look out the driver window and saw an 18-wheeler coming for me. Now, this is where things go absolutely wrong. I remember vividly seeing an 18-wheeler approach me, my vision cut probably from the shock, so I never felt the sensation of being hit. But when I woke up, I was over half a mile and spun out down the road, and someone was trying to give me water. The space between the driver's side door and the middle console was about 1.5 inches. That's where I was sitting, so when the EMTs came, they had to pull me out of the passenger side door. It wasn't until I got on the stretcher that I felt everything, and I couldn't breathe. On the way to the hospital in Albany, I just remember saying, "I can't breathe," 1,000 times. When I got to the hospital, they immediately put me in the SICU because I had a hole the size of a softball in my lung, and the glass was sitting in it. My pelvis, tailbone, and entire left side of my rib cage was broken. I remember telling the nurse to call my mom, my dad, my in-laws. My mom lived in Louisiana at the time, but she drove from Louisiana to Georgia. That was all I heard before going to sleep in the SICU. The next cognitive memory that I have is waking up, and my mom being there. I had apparently slept for 3 days and was still in the SICU. When I woke up, the doctor and the nurse came in and let me know that my lung had closed up miraculously overnight, seemingly, and that my fractures weren't too bad to heal from, and that I was lucky to be alive. I asked about the glass in my lungs. The doctor didn't know what I was talking about. I asked about the broken ribs, pelvis, and tailbone, and he said they had always been fractures. I asked about the accident, and it wasn't an 18-wheeler. It was a Dodge Ram with a massive grille in the front. I was just in shock at this point. I spent 11 total days in the hospital. It was difficult to walk with the fractures, and I stayed with my mother for a month while I recovered. That is, until, somehow, my now husband was eligible for bond. I never asked questions. I moved in with him the same day that he was released, and we've been married ever since August of 2016. Minor things are different now and then. My mom doesn't remember a lot of what I did growing up, but my father, in this new reality, had a terminal illness. He'd gotten aplastic anemia, which very quickly turned into leukemia, and he died within 7 months. That breaks me. It was extremely fast onset, and it makes me beg the question, was it a life for a life? I probably died, once, if not twice, and to restore balance, a life had to be taken. So, this just happened to me a few weeks ago, and I finally got the chance to sit down and write this out. I've been going on some dates here and there, trying to find someone to spend the holidays with. I matched with this one guy and we started talking pretty quickly. He was really nice and funny, and his quips and way of talking actually reminded me of myself. I thought that we jived really well, so when he asked for the first date, I was pretty excited. Onward to the first date, which was a little over a month ago. We had a great time. He told me about how he worked at some big data company, like he worked on servers or something for them. He joked about his family because he was smack dab in the middle of a whopping 9 kids, but talked about how he didn't want kids. I don't either, so I thought that was a relief. He talked about where he lived and how he had a weird neighbor, and again, made a long joke about how he acts like he's undercover and made up this whole story about him. He told me about one of his favorite hobbies, which was resin work. He made custom dice, containers, vases, all sorts of things. In fact, he showed me a keychain that he'd made. Overall, it was a great night, and I was already preparing for a second date with him. We continued talking, and we had a date planned, but then I got sick, so we had to postpone. We finally got to have our second date, and that's when things got weird. We went to a restaurant that I had never been to, but when I walked in, I immediately got this feeling of déjà vu. At first I thought, okay, no big deal, that's happened before, and just proceeded to find my date in the crowd. He greeted me and I made my way over to the table. Just like our first date, he complimented my outfit and made the same cheesy line of it matching my eyes. But then, our conversation was the same from our first date, nearly word for word. He asked me how my day went, specifically with one of my classes. I'm taking an optional course for my work, which he also asked me on our first date. Then he asked me more about my job, the same questions that he'd asked before. I recall that because I hate having to repeat myself, like when people aren't listening, so normally repeating something like that would annoy me, but He seemed to genuinely be asking, like we had never mentioned it before. So I asked about his job, phrasing it like I already knew, because I did. And I asked, "You work on data servers, right?" He looked at me curiously, almost as if he was trying to remember if he told me, but the way that he explained it was the exact same. He told me about his siblings, telling me the same things he told me the first time. Our conversation turned to hobbies and free time, and he mentioned his resin work, and once again pulled out his keychain to show me. It was actually really unsettling at the time, and it made me think that maybe I'd had a really lucid dream or something. But he even mentioned this being our second date, so this was definitely happening for a second time. I even tried to see if I could sway the conversation, and I asked about the restaurant since I wasn't familiar with it, but he would then end up asking me questions from our first date, and it would go right back to where we were. It was such a weird feeling, and I couldn't understand what was happening. I eventually stopped trying to fight it, and just went along with the night, pretending like I had never heard the things that he was telling me, and like I'd never told him the things I did that night. When we finished for the night, he walked me to my car, and we talked about getting together again, and I agreed. He was still a great guy, but that date was just odd. We've been talking ever since, and he suggested another date. This time not at a restaurant, so I'm hoping that it won't happen a third time. But the whole date still confounds me, and I have no explanation for it. I haven't heard of whole days or conversations being repeated in that sense, but it definitely seems like a glitch, or a replay in reality. I'll let you know if our third date repeats, because I may have to ask him about it too. And hopefully it confirms that I'm not crazy. I have a bit of a silly glitch that I wanted to share with you, as it was weird and I really don't know what to make of it. It's not scary at all, it's not even that eventful, and I'll try not to make it too long, but it's the only glitch that I've had happen to me, so I guess I'm a bit excited to share it. I've never experienced anything paranormal or anything, so this was a bit of a shock. To start it off, I guess I should explain the situation a little bit. I live in an apartment with my cousin, so it's just me and her that are ever here. She doesn't really bring anyone over, I don't bring people over, so there's no way that a third party is involved in what happened. I'm a bit of a water snob. I don't like tap water at all. The tap water here is too hard, and when I drink it, it gives me really bad tonsil stones, which is just gross. So I don't drink it. I used to buy cases of water bottles, but I started feeling bad about all the plastic waste that I was producing, so I instead bought one of those big 5-gallon jugs from Walmart. It's one of the ones that you can bring back to Walmart and pay to refill with the Primo brand water, which is very heavily filtered. I also bought a water pump for it from Amazon for like $15, and I keep the jug in my room on my desk. It's been an absolute godsend for me, and it makes a lot less waste. So, I'm happy. My cousin isn't like me at all when it comes to this kind of stuff, and she makes fun of me for it, meaning she doesn't come into my room to use it or anything like that. I also have about 20 bottles of water in my room for the times when the big jug gets empty and I need to go to Walmart to fill it, just as a kind of temporary backup. Okay, that all put out there, here's the glitch. Last week, I was homesick for most of the week. I caught a bug that thankfully was not COVID, but it was enough to knock me down for 3 days. I'm grateful that I had the sick time and was able to stay home because I was miserable. During this time, I ended up drinking a lot of water. because I was feeling non-stop thirsty. Unfortunately, on day 2 of me being sick, I ended up drinking the last of my 5 gallons. Feeling like I wasn't going to go to Walmart to refill it yet, because I didn't think I would be able to carry it out of the store full without falling over. I took the pump off, replaced the cap on the bottle, and pulled my case of water bottles out from under my desk so that I had them easily accessible. I got through 1 or 2 of those bottles before passing out for the night. Here's where the glitch happened, and I honestly cannot explain it. When I woke up the next morning, I was groggy, a bit out of it, but I got up and went to the bathroom to do my routine. When I came out, I reached for a bottle of water, which was sitting on my desk right by my 5-gallon jug, but paused. The jug that was empty just the night prior was now about 1/3 of the way full. I swear I stared at it for like 5 minutes, trying to piece together the whole situation. I know it was empty. I had tilted it to suck all the water out of it with the pump, and it was completely dry. I had taken the pump off to put it on the USB charger, which I only do when it's empty. Yet it was sitting there in front of me with close to 2 gallons left. The pump was still plugged in, and the cap was still on it. So it wasn't like I just imagined taking it off when it was empty. A few things to kind of cover the logical possibilities. First, I know for a fact that it was completely empty. It's obvious when it's empty. The bottle weighs nothing. You can see the water level as the plastic is clear with a slight blue tint. Plus, like I mentioned, I had tilted it to get the last of the water out. If it still had 2-ish gallons in it when I was using it, I would not have been able to do that. One thought that I had was maybe my cousin had refilled it, but that wouldn't make sense. When you refill it, you pay for the full 5 gallons. So for her to sneak into my room while I'm asleep, grab the water jug, take it to Walmart, pay for 5 gallons of water, and then fill it with 2, and then sneak it back into my room without me noticing, it just doesn't work. The water that was in it was definitely not tap water. It was absolutely the filtered water that comes from the Primo machines. I tested it with my little ppm meter that I have from back when I had a 0 water pitcher, which got broken when we moved in, and the meter read that it was 12, versus the couple hundred ppm that comes from the sink. I did this because I also had that thought that maybe she'd filled it with the sink water just to mess with me. I also asked her if she'd filled it, and she told me that she hadn't. If she was playing a prank, I feel like she would have fessed up to it. Otherwise, there was no reward for the risk. So, by the end of this, I had 2 gallons of water in my jug, with no way for it to have been filled. But yet it was. Like I said, this isn't scary at all, I know, just really weird and I really cannot explain it. If anyone has any thoughts, I would love to hear them, because I'm at a point where I'm 99% certain that this is a glitch in the Matrix, albeit a rather boring one. I just found your channel, and it is really interesting. It reminds me of a strange period of time where some bizarre things happened with 4 X's. I'm telling you the story. It is 100% true, and I hope it makes the cut, and is weird enough to air, because it was really weird to me. This happened over a period of time from 1991 to 1998. I'm into the unusual and paranormal, and I've had lots of glitchy experiences. I've been seen outside getting into a big van when I was actually home in bed. I've heard songs start playing again, right after they finish, on sound systems in stores. I've seen the same people walk by twice. I've seen floor patterns change in front of my eyes. You get the picture. But the story that I'm about to tell is the strangest thing that has happened to me, and I hope it's good enough to be read on here. For context, I am an almost senior woman now, and was in my 30s when this happened. It helps to note that I have never been lucky in relationships in the past. I had short relationships and was dumped often back then. The first time this happened was in 1991. I had been dating ex number 1. It seemed to be going well for about a month, and then suddenly he just decided to dump me. I did not know why he dumped me, and I didn't handle it well, and would phone and pester them for about a week, wanting to know why he did, before deciding to move on. I had stopped calling ex number 1 for a good month. One day, I heard the phone ring and just didn't feel like answering it. I rarely answer the phone, and I let the answering machine get it. It was a landline phone, as we didn't really have cell phones back then. I let the answering machine take this particular call, and this was back when you could hear the caller leaving the message in real time. I heard ex number 1 yelling, "Stop calling me! I want you to leave me alone and want nothing to do with you." I picked up the phone and asked him what he was talking about, and told him that I hadn't called him in about a month, and that I was moving on already. He insisted that I had been calling him non-stop. I asked him, "Was this recently?" And he said yes. I told him that I have not been calling him, and told him to leave me alone. I thought, well, maybe he was actually missing me and was wanting to get my attention somehow. I had a roommate who could vouch for me, and told me that she hadn't seen me call him because they thought that he might be mad. I dismissed it until it happened again with a different ex, who we'll call ex number 2. I didn't actually date ex number 2, but I wanted to, so we'll still just call him ex number 2. We met and became really good friends, and we had lots of fun together. I was really into him and could have sworn that he was into me. This relationship actually lasted almost a year. I decided it was time to tell him how I felt, so I did, in the form of a nice card. He totally distanced himself from me, and it became clear that he didn't want what I wanted. So, sadly, I just accepted it and moved on. I didn't call this guy at all after it ended, as I had the first guy. 2 months later, and I was moving on just fine, my roommate came home and laughingly told me that he'd told her that I was calling him all the time and bothering him. You see, she and he were also friends. She could totally vouch for me and told him herself that I had not been calling him. She told him that I had not mentioned him at all, and that I was not interested in him at all anymore. I thought this was funny, and she thought that he was still thinking of me. I remembered the time that this happened earlier, and I started to wonder what the heck was going on. But, again, I dismissed it until it happened again in 1997. So, yes, I met a guy who will be known as ex number 3. We had a great time together for about 4 or 5 months. I have to admit, I got a little demanding, and I messed this one up. He dumped me, and I was sad about it for months. I did not harass him on the phone at all, but would run into him a lot when going out at night. Yes, I would run into him on purpose. I didn't bother him when I saw him, though. Also, the fact that my bestie was dating his roommate made that all the more possible. I was hopeful for about 2 months, but I started feeling better and moving on, but I was still going out with my bestie and having fun with her. She called me one day and told me that he had told her that I had been pestering him and would not leave him alone. She said to me that she told him that I had moved on a long time ago and had not been calling him. I was starting to wonder why this was happening, and how could it be that these 3 guys could all think that I had been calling them, Even if they had changed their minds and wanted me back, what are the chances that they would all use the same weird ploy to get my attention? They did not know each other, and the friends that were involved did not know each other. It happened again with ex number 4. I met him through another close friend of mine in 1998. He and I hit it off, and had a great time for about a month. He just ghosted me, just stopped calling me. Neither my friend or I could figure out why he did this. He hadn't disappeared because he still called and hung out with her. He had a pager at this time. This was still before cell phones were a really big thing, but pagers were. I paged him a fair bit for about 3 weeks, or maybe even a month. I gave up after a while, realizing that this was not going to get me anywhere, especially when he didn't call me back. Again, I moved on, but still hung out and went out with my friends. Neither one of us drank. This is important so you know that I wasn't drunk when the weirdness happened. I would often crash on her couch when we went out on the weekends, as we lived quite far apart, and I didn't have a car at the time. So one day my friend called me and said that something strange is going on. She told me that he told her that I had been paging him non-stop all week. I said that I haven't paged him for a long time. Is he mistaking the pages for the past pages? She told me no, that he had meant that they were recent. He showed her the pager and there had been pages from me recently. The only thing is, I had not been paging him. Then, she told me that there was one on a night that I had been out with her and had spent the night at her place. The page had come from my phone number at my house. Another strange thing is, it had come in at 6 a.m. She explained to him that that was not me, and it couldn't have been because I was still asleep on her couch at her place. She and I were both baffled by this. I did have roommates at the time, and I wondered if one of them could be doing it. I may have even asked them, but I can't remember. Between the 3 of us, a lot of numbers were dialed, and it was unlikely that hitting a redial would have reached his pager, especially since they didn't know his number. I hadn't given it to them. I can't see how any of my roommates would get up at 6 a.m. on a weekend just to page him. Also, I was good friends with them, so they had no reason to do that to me. So what happened? Did I just somehow black out, race home on a train that wasn't running yet, page him, and then race back to my friend's couch? It was strange. So, I am baffled by this pattern to this day, and the similarity of the circumstances with these guys that didn't know each other at all. What are the chances of all of them making it all up and lying about me bugging them? I'm beginning to think that I have a crazy doppelganger that was stalking them, or maybe I glitched out into a different reality where I was harassing them when they said I was. It hasn't happened again, that I know of. Maybe there is some rational explanation, but I haven't found one yet. Hi, Raven. The story that I'm about to tell you actually happened today, and I immediately knew that I had to submit it. For background, my husband and I moved into our new place almost 2 months ago. We love it here, but we decided to do this move all on our own, without any help, so it's been rather slow and at times straining. I work from home, and I also happen to be super handy. So, while he's been at work, I've built all of our furniture, decorated everything, have unpacked all of the clothes, and more on my time off, which is quite more than him. He helps me whenever he can. I more than happily have taken control over everything. My husband letting me do all the decor? This woman says yes. I'll get into it now. So many of our clothes still need to be put away in our closet. We also had to get rid of many things. We both just have too much. And sadly for him, about 50% of his shirts that no longer fit him. He's been needing more t-shirts. His 28th birthday was a few weeks ago, and one of the many things that I got him was a black t-shirt that said born in 95. I was born later the same year, so I also got myself the same born in 95 shirt, but in gray. I've seen him wear it a few times already, and I'm glad that he loves it. Here is where things get goose-bumpy. Today we woke up at the same time. I got up and went to use the restroom while he changed. Today he wasn't working. When I got out of the bathroom, I noticed that he had put the shirt on. We went down to eat breakfast, and towards the end of breakfast we joked that I should put mine on as well, and we could match for the day. It's something that we haven't done before, and the joke became a let's do it thing. I have so many hampers of clean clothes to put away still, 3 of which are in our bedroom. I remembered unfolding my t-shirt while standing on the side of our bed and putting it away in the closet. But it wasn't in the normal part of the closet where the t-shirts are. I remember it being there because I wanted to wear it soon, and so I kept it separate from the rest. So I told him, it shouldn't be too hard to find it in the mess. I remember folding it and putting it in the closet from one of the clean hampers the other day. He said he couldn't wait for me to put it on. We then went upstairs so I could change and get ready for the day. When I get upstairs, I go to the closet and it's not there in the spot that I had left it, which was the bottom drawer, which is normally his sweatpants drawer. I then start to have the weird feeling that I might have dreamt it, and that it was one of those instances where the dream was so real that I confused it for reality. My husband is laying on the bed and I tell him, hey, I could have sworn I put it here and now it's not there. I'm gonna start taking out the clothes from these hampers and fold the easy things until I find it. It has to be here because I washed it. He replies, okay, I'll be here, love. Take your time. I laughed. I might as well make something productive out of this. And he replies, I love it, and I'm proud of you. I hadn't worn this shirt since a few days after it came in the mail several weeks ago, so I was excited to find it. I made it a mission. About 20 minutes later, quite a bit of clean clothes are now folded on the bed. That's when I sat next to him and told him, I literally folded it the other day, and now I'm questioning whether I dreamt it or not. He stated, yeah, I remember you folding it too, just the other day, and putting it in the closet in that separate spot, bottom drawer. I said, I think it was just a dream that felt real, but it feels like a genuine memory that I had, so that doesn't make sense. Like I remember it. He then says, yeah, now I'm feeling the exact same way. It feels like it was now a dream of mine too, but it feels like it was a literal memory, not a dream. I remember you doing it. So now at this point, we came to realize that we both either had the exact same dream, but from our own points of view, or have the same implanted memory that never actually happened. I mentioned in a light-hearted manner, we always talk and joke about what we're doing together in parallel universes, but what if something happened to both of us in that one, and we're now here, and we're both just having identical shared memories together from that one? His face actually got serious and he said, I actually think about it all the time. All jokes aside, I actually wonder. I also mentioned to him how I've occasionally been seeing bright split-second flashes of white light, like if someone was taking a picture from a camera like Flash. He went on to say that he's been seeing the same flashes too. This is when we both sat there and realized that this memory was real, but that it didn't happen. not in this timeline. I get goosebumps. Alright, well, I'm gonna keep taking out and unfolding the clothes until I find it, I guess. We have to match today, I said as I hopped back off the bed. I walked over to the hamper and picked up a shirt that was inside out. When I flipped it over, it was the shirt. It was oddly the very next item of clothing I picked up right after just having this revelation. I pulled it out and my husband got very wide-eyed. That's actually wild. There's like 90 pieces of clothing in these hampers and you found the shirt right after we just had our wild conversation? I got so many goosebumps, but my emotions were also mixed with excitement because we were now able to match today. I threw it on, but I thought about it a lot throughout the day. I truthfully think that we had memories from a parallel universe that something had happened to us in. And I wonder if his memory of it is what subconsciously also made him wear that shirt today. I have to share this story about my old childhood home because I felt like I was losing my mind when this happened. My family lived in the same house throughout our childhood. We moved into this house when I was a baby, and when my 2 other siblings came along, we made room for them too. And when I went to college, I would come home to visit my parents in that same home. I knew the ins and outs of that place. The main floor had the living room, the dining room, the kitchen, a bathroom, and a small closet/pantry off the kitchen. Upstairs had 3 bedrooms and a bathroom. The basement was pretty open and empty, other than a spot under the stairs where the washer/dryer hookups were, and my mom had a small laundry area set up there. At least, that's what I always remembered. As an adult, out of college, and out on my own, my parents told us that they were going to retire to Florida. Immediately, I knew I wanted to buy the house from them. As my dad got older, it got harder for him to keep up with maintenance, so the house wasn't in the best shape, but it wasn't like it was uninhabitable. Besides, the market at the time was crazy expensive for anything else, so why not buy something that I could get a discount on and that I already knew inside and out? The first few months were great. I slowly moved my stuff in, after I replaced the carpet and flooring. Once I at least got my stuff in, I started doing more work around the place, just as my dad had shown and taught me. But it was when I started working on the basement that I noticed something was off. When I went to the basement, it was like something was missing. I bought a new washer and dryer that were both front loads. That was different from what my parents had, but the basement itself looked different. But all I could remember about the basement was the laundry area. I looked all over to see if something stood out, but I couldn't spot anything. But then came my weird obsession with counting stairs as I went up and down them. I guess I should mention that, no matter where I went, I have always counted the stairs. I don't know why, but I remember the basement always being 14. I remember this because the stairs leading upstairs to the bedroom had 16, including the base step that curved around. I remember thinking as a kid that the space between the ground floor and upstairs was taller than that from the basement to the ground floor. But when I went back to the basement stairs, there were 15. So I went back and counted. Going down, there were 14, going up, 15. That's just the stairs. I didn't include the concrete basement floor or the ground level floor. I specifically counted the old rickety wooden steps. How could that even be possible? I watched closely as I stepped on each, but my math never changed. 14 down, 15 up. I couldn't sit there and dwell on a rogue step though, so I set it aside in my brain and moved on, telling myself that it must have been like that as a kid, and that I'm hyper-focusing on it now. But then things only got weirder when my sister came to visit. She didn't live too far away, and she wanted to come see what all I had done to the place so far, so I got some things for us to have a nice lunch and coffee together. We were in the kitchen prepping stuff and snacking when we started reminiscing on things we did as a kid. At one point, she mentioned needing to use the bathroom and joked, asking if she could use the one on the same floor or if she needed to go to the basement. I remember staring at her confused by her comment. We didn't have a bathroom in the basement. They were upstairs and on the same floor. She looked at me strangely and reminded me how Mom would get mad at us for using the bathroom on this floor after swimming because we made the carpet wet. She said that she made us use the sliding door in the kitchen and then use the one in the basement because we wouldn't get the carpet wet. I just remember looking at her funny. What are you talking about? Our bedrooms were upstairs. There are no bedrooms or bathrooms in the basement. She looked concerned. She explained how Dad had built 2 bedrooms in the basement for us. The bathroom in the basement was just a toilet, but he completely redid it, adding an actual bathroom with a stand and shower, and then built the 2 bedrooms for us. She explained how it was just going to be one for me, but she begged to have a bedroom too. She said that we thought it was the coolest thing because we called them our little apartments down there. I did not recall any of this. It didn't make sense. We shared a room upstairs. Our parents had one, and our baby sister had her own room. Why was she remembering something different? She said when I was 12, her 10, they said we needed our own rooms, so he built the rooms in the basement, and they turned the extra room upstairs into an office. But I remembered the office. I remember using our old computer to print out pictures for school. But why couldn't I recall the basement bedrooms? That never happened in my memory. I told her how I remembered Mom making us use the ground floor bathroom so we didn't track water all the way upstairs. But my sister insisted that there was never a bathroom upstairs. So we walked through it together. I showed her the bathroom upstairs. It went our bedroom on the right, the bathroom across the hall, and then our baby sister's and parents' room. She looked so confused as she studied the rooms. And then we went to the basement. I knew then that it wasn't a matter of misremembering. She looked genuinely disturbed, like someone had ripped out a whole memory from under her. She outlined it perfectly. She measured how wide the rooms were and then walked towards the back, explaining where the bathroom was. She even explained how creepy it used to be until Dad had put in a ceiling light and the powder pink carpet. We carefully inspected the concrete, the walls, and the ceiling looking for patches, divots, even color differences, just to prove her theory. To prove that maybe there were walls there or plumbing, but there was nothing. The house was practically handed over to me. There was no time for someone to have come in and tear down all that and then clean it up. So then, how come we had 2 completely different memories? Could that be why the basement felt so weird to me? And do the steps have anything to do with it? Is that 15th step some kind of gateway to a different timeline, where we lived in the room upstairs versus having the rooms in the basement? We were both pretty freaked out about this revelation. We both joked that we were getting old and that our memories were tricking us, so we went back upstairs to enjoy our time together. But deep down, I could tell that she was still thinking about it. After she left, I thought about asking my parents, but to be honest, I don't know if I could stomach asking them. I know it sounds silly, but what would I say if they said they remembered the basement rooms? Yeah, I don't remember that, and the rooms and bathroom down there don't exist anyways. I still have not asked them. I still live in that exact same house, but instead of being afraid of the basement as a kid, well, I'm afraid of it now. I'm worried that one day I will count 14 steps going up again, in the rooms and the bathroom will once again exist. And if that happens, I don't know how I'm going to explain it to my sister. Hello, Raven. I work as a delivery guy and listen to your podcasts all the time, especially Glitches in the Matrix. Finally, I had enough time to submit one of my own. I'm not a native English speaker, so I apologize for any mistakes. To completely understand my story, I must tell you a few things, which won't make sense at first, but at the end they will. I live in a small town in the Czech Republic. It consists of about 2,000 people. Everybody knows each other well here, and you also need to know that, in my country, we typically do shots of alcohol to the dead people to keep the memory and pay respects to them. My story happened a few years ago. It was a time just after high school. None of the boys had girlfriends at the time, so we were hanging out a lot. We used to go to the pub, grab a few beers, watch some sports on TV, reminisce on school times, and have fun together. It's kind of a tradition in our country. We're not alcoholics, it's just the way that it is here. This year was very strange. We always reminisce on our school times as the better days, and it was 3 times that we did shots to the teachers who had died. None of them were too old, and none of us expected that they would pass that soon. The first one was our class teacher. She was like a second mother to us. Next was our physics teacher. We used to make fun of him in his class, but he was strict. But he was always fair to us. And the third one was our art teacher. He was older than the previous ones mentioned, but he was very warm and had a kind voice. And every time he entered our classroom, he would say, "Good morning wishes to you, and sit down." This sentence will make sense later on. I remember that night. We all talked about him, raised the shots, and remembered how he was. I specifically remember my 2 friends and raising the glass of vodka for his respects. My friend said, "That's already 3 of our teachers who are gone forever. What a loss. God rest his soul." And then we raised the shots. From this moment, our lives with our friends had been more separated than back then. One of my friends got a girlfriend and he spent most of the time with her, and I started working as a pizza delivery person, so I had very long shifts. It was a rough time for me to hop in for the first time to a full-time job. It was horrible work. I found myself getting up to the alarm, having coffee and a cigarette, and then going to the shop for water. It was a routine. One day, like any other, I was doing my routine. I got up, had coffee, and went to the shop. I entered and went my usual route for the water. As I went my usual way, I stopped near the fruit and wanted to grab some apples for breakfast. And there he was, standing, just looking at the fruit. My art teacher, who had passed about a year prior. My mouth went all the way down. How is this possible? I said to myself that he probably just had a brother or a twin, but then he said an odd sentence to greet me with that same warm and kind voice that he had. "Good morning wishes to you." I froze. No way. It was him 100%. I greeted him back and then went for my water. I couldn't stop thinking about this the entire day. In our small town, everyone knows each other. There was no way he had a brother and no one knew about it. I could not get it out of my head. So, I called the boys to meet in a pub over the weekend. We grabbed a few beers after a long while of not seeing each other, talked about our lives, etc. And then I mentioned if they remembered this teacher dying. Both of them said no. I froze again. I specifically remember that he was the 3rd teacher that had died that year, and we had a drink to him. I said this memory to them and they just laughed at me and assured me that only 2 of our teachers had died that year. What the hell is happening? I mean, I'm glad he's back alive, but I can't make any sense of it. Did I jump realities? Or accidentally die and experience quantum immortality? I don't know. But the thing is, things have been better since that day. I have a better job. I don't go home exhausted. I have an awesome girlfriend and we go out with the boys more often. My theory is that I really jumped through realities, but this reality feels good. Thank you for reading and stay awesome, Raven. Hello everyone. I'm new to this sub, but I think I have an experience that fits here. I would post it in the paranormal sub, but I truly believe this to be a natural phenomena. Therefore, I thought it would fit in with this topic. I've had odd experiences ever since early childhood. I haven't really shared many on here, as many sound flat out insane, and I don't personally enjoy the rude backlash. However, I mostly visit odd subs anyway, and most of us weirdos are typically open-minded, kind, and respectful. Anyways, all I can say is that our reality is not truly what it seems. Today, I'll share with you my vortex experience. I was 18 at the time. I was an overall good kid, never drank until college, zero drugs. It was the summer before I started college and I was still living at my parents' home. This experience happened in my bathroom after I got out of the shower. I was standing, covered up with a towel on, in front of the counter vanity mirror brushing my hair. Next thing I know, I hear this whooshing sound, followed by rapid wind as well as felt dust. I look above myself in the mirror and I see what appears to be a miniature tornado whirling at a speed that I can't explain. It was about 2 feet tall, maybe a foot across, the widest part attached to the ceiling, and it appeared grayish or black. I was basically a deer in headlights then, as I kind of went in shock, as my mind was trying to figure out what the hell that thing was. I stood back and just looked up at it. I could feel the wind and breeze on my face, particles of dust. I was a curious kid and had already experienced my share of weird, paranormal, etc. So I proceeded to reach my hand up to touch it. As quickly as I did that, my hand literally got slapped down, and I heard this voice screaming in my head saying, "Don't do that." It was there for maybe another 5 seconds, and then gone. I was left absolutely at a loss regarding what had just happened. I couldn't piece together what it was. I wasn't scared. I didn't really have any emotion and was more in awe. I intuitively knew that that would have been very, very bad had I placed my hand in that thing. The voice I heard, the slap that I got, it had saved me. I believe that to be either my higher self, a helpful, multi-dimensional being. I'm not religious, so I don't subscribe to guardian angels, but you could classify it as such. Who knows? Maybe it was myself from another timeline helping myself. This happened in the summer of 2000. There was less about this topic back then than there is now. I've never experienced one since, and I'm grateful that I did. I truly believe that these things to be some sort of natural phenomena that our science cannot explain. Or science won't explain. Or, just flat out, the science that has been hidden or suppressed from us. In my heart, I believe that vortex to have been a portal to either a different time period, dimension, world, or alternate reality. Think of the Bermuda Triangle, much smaller scale though. That would be the most basic example that I can think of if you're trying to understand more of what I believe that thing to be. Anyways, I'll likely get ripped to shreds for sharing this as a liar or being delusional. Maybe I am delusional, but definitely not a liar. That was my honest experience. It will forever stay with me, and it has allowed me to continue to ask questions about what our reality actually is. I've never stopped asking questions, as well as seeking the truth, and all you folks should do the same. Thanks so much for reading. If you have any experience or thoughts with this phenomena personally, I'd love to hear your stories. And happy fall equinox. Oh, and again, I'll share some final details to assist. I was 18, female, no mental illness, 0 drugs or alcohol at that age. The location was Madison, Wisconsin, United States. I was, and am, very open to everything paranormal. I've always questioned our system, our reality, our world. The concept of the Matrix may not be so far off. I've always been sensitive. Let's leave it at that. I played baseball in college. One day during my freshman season, I had something happen that was relatively trivial, but had a big impact on my view of reality. As I said, I was a freshman on the team but had played in all games up to that point in the season. In college and pro baseball, players usually have one position on defense that they play consistently. In the batting order, players usually bat in the same spot each game. This was the situation for me. I played center field on defense and batted 5th in the batting order. For most of the team, other than pitchers, it was understood who was playing each position and your spot in the batting order. One Tuesday during our spring season, we had a night game against a rival team. I finished class in the early afternoon that day and had a couple of hours before my team started warm-ups for the game. I decided to take a nap in my dorm room with my free time. During my nap, I had a very specific and clear dream about walking to the baseball field before the game. In my dream, I walked into the dugout prior to the game and looked at the lineup posted on the wall. The lineup in my dream showed I was playing right field and batting 9th in the batting order. I had never played right field, and batted 9th in a game before, so this was very odd to me in the dream. I am 100% certain a coach had not told me this prior to the game. I woke up from the dream and immediately remembered it because it was odd and unusually vivid. However, I didn't think too much of the dream because I was now in a hurry to get to the locker room and get dressed up for warm-ups. Once I was in the locker room, I got dressed and started walking toward the dugout to look at the lineup for the game. As I approached the dugout, I had an intense feeling come over me that I had done this exact thing before. I began to realize that everything that was happening at that moment was overlapped with my dream. I stopped walking and did a quick reality check to make sure that I was awake. I continued to stand still for a moment because I sort of enjoyed the feeling of having a glimpse of the future. I even thought about telling one of my teammates what was happening, but I figured they would think I was joking or crazy. I started walking again and entered the dugout to see the lineup for my game. Just as the dream predicted, I was playing right field and batting 9th. This made me feel super strange and a little detached from reality. I wonder why something seemingly trivial and inconsequential had been shown to me in a dream. I have tried to find simple explanations for why this happened, but I haven't come up with any. I kept the lineup card for that game as a reminder of this event. Hi, Raven. I absolutely love your show. This is my first submission to As the Raven Dreams. That's me. I've encountered strange happenings throughout my life. Patty, if you're tuning into this podcast, yes, this story is about us. Oh, hi, Patty. Back in the late 70s, I owned an AMC Gremlin and lived in the western Chicago suburbs. I had just picked up my friend Patty and we were on our way to work where we cleaned a library. One of the expressways had a notoriously dangerous exit, with very little space between the on and off ramps. As I approached the off-ramp, a semi-truck had just merged onto the highway. We should have collided. Patty screamed and I was sure we were about to be crushed. But to our amazement, we passed through unscathed. And from the exit ramp, we saw that the trucker had pulled over to the shoulder. There's no logical explanation as to why the truck didn't run us over. The gremlins were small, but not small enough to fit under a semi. One moment we were bracing for the worst accident of our lives, and the next we were safely on the off-ramp. Glitch, other dimension, so grateful yet truly peculiar. The very next day, we were back in my car, driving east on what they called the Eisenhower Expressway heading into Chicago. About 3/4 of a mile west of the city, we spotted something totally out of the ordinary that looked like a long silver bullet train on an overpass. It was so bright that it was almost blinding. About half a mile past that overpass, we saw 3 figures in full hazmat suits standing right in the middle of the eastbound and westbound traffic. They were using some kind of tool and seemed to be searching for something. Besides the hazmat suits, what made the scene so strange was that the other drivers didn't seem to notice them or care. If you're familiar with Chicago in the late 70s, or even now, you know that drivers typically honk for any reason. I switched lanes to give them space, but the other drivers didn't. Neither the people in the hazmat suits nor the other drivers paid any attention to each other. It was otherworldly odd. We checked the newspaper for days, hoping to find some story or mention of the event, but nothing was ever reported. That weekend, we encountered what felt like 2 alternate reality events. Patty and I compared the episodes and concluded that we had experienced the same thing. When we shared our story with others, they thought we were crazy, because even though hazmat suits and silver bullet trains had been invented, they weren't typically seen anywhere yet. Driving through a semi-truck only rendered comments in regard to how lucky we were and how I should be more careful, but no mention of how we could have just passed through the truck. It was truly a bizarre weekend with no explanations. Was it glitches? Or had we entered an alternate universe? I hope I'm not just losing my mind, but I think that something is going on around me. So, you know how in video games, stuff you aren't looking at unloads to save up memory? I'm convinced that something like this is happening to me after yesterday. For a few years now, I would notice situations where I was walking down the street and some random passersby were talking. I would look down at my phone for a couple of seconds to check some messages, and for some reason, their conversations stop mid-sentence. I would look back up and they were still in the same place, same pose, and their conversation unpaused right where it stopped. I always thought that situations like these, there were a lot, are accidents because whenever I was actively thinking about it, paying attention, which is what really matters in this, I think, it wouldn't work. However, what happened to me yesterday has me convinced that something is not right with the time around me. I was walking back home from walking my aunt's dog and listening to music on full blast. I was in the zone, so I wasn't paying much attention to my surroundings. I crossed the street next to a roundabout, and a bus had to stop for me. Right as I crossed, I stopped and pulled out my phone. A song in my playlist came on, but I wanted a different one, so I leave that one on, still jamming out, whilst looking through my playlist for the one I actually want. So I wasn't paying attention to my surroundings for a full 3 minutes. I ended up listening to the whole song before I changed to the one that I wanted, so I'm sure of the 3 minutes passing. And when I look back up, The bus is in the exact same place it was on the roundabout as 3 minutes ago, when I stopped looking at it. Now, there were other cars there, so if the bus randomly stopped, I would definitely have noticed the car horns, but no. Also, a bus can't just sort of start moving from a spot like a car can, if you know what I mean. It has to get going first to reach some speed. And this bus wasn't crawling like they do when they start their route. At least the old ones in my town have to crawl a bit before getting up to speed. I'm very confused about it. I talked with one of my friends about it, and he said that he sometimes notices stuff like that too. And just like me, it's only when we don't pay attention to our surroundings. Do we live in a simulation, and the computer is saving on processing power by ignoring stuff when we aren't paying attention to it? Hi, Raven. I went to high school in Antioch, California, and graduated from Antioch High School in June of 1986. I lived with my aunt and uncle during my high school years, and it was understood that I was expected to move out within no more than a couple of weeks after graduation. They had 7 children of their own, and they were starting to see me as a bad influence on my cousins because I had turned away from the religion they practiced. I worked part-time while in school, but I needed to find full-time work in order to find a new place to live. My then-girlfriend and I had a mutual friend whose family was going to Europe for several weeks in June and July on an extended vacation. My girlfriend was house-sitting while they were gone, and so, while I tried to get a full-time job and new digs sorted out, I crashed with her at our friend's house. One night, I dreamed that I had auditioned for a play. In the dream, I was riding in my girlfriend's car, and we were leaving her father's business office and driving to Pittsburgh High School to see if I had been cast in the play. Pittsburgh High is where the cast list for the play The Crucible was going to be posted. Pittsburgh High School is in Pittsburgh, California, which is the closest neighboring town to Antioch. As of the night of June 1986, when I had this dream, I had never attended Pittsburgh High. I didn't know anyone who went to Pittsburgh High, and I had only set foot on the campus of Pittsburgh High once in my life, attending a football game in my junior year. After waking up, I told my girlfriend about this strange dream over breakfast. It was very lifelike, but it made no sense. I had been active in drama in high school, so auditioning for a play made sense, but all the other elements were out of place in typical dream fashion. After all, I had recently graduated high school and I never attended Pittsburgh High anyways, so why would I be doing a play there now? The Crucible was one of my favorite plays, but I didn't know of anyone producing it at the time. Pittsburgh High or otherwise. My girlfriend's father's office was in Pittsburgh, but neither my girlfriend nor I worked there. Honestly, I probably only told my girlfriend about it because it was such a vivid dream. Time passed. I moved away from Antioch for a couple of months to get a job and money stuff sorted out, but moved back in September of 1986. By then, my girlfriend was working part-time for her father and attending the local junior college, Los Medanos College, LMC. The school is located right in between Antioch and Pittsburgh and serves both communities. At this point, I want to note that, of course, I wasn't thinking about that dream from June anymore. I had moved on with my life. One day, while walking my girlfriend to class, I saw a flyer on a bulletin board announcing auditions for the fall play. The play was The Crucible. Excited for a chance to do one of my favorite plays, I auditioned. As it turned out, LMC's theater was too small to house a full-stage play. It would be staged at Pittsburgh High School instead, because Pittsburgh High's drama teacher was directing the play for the college. Several days after the auditions, I drove my girlfriend's car over to her father's office to pick her up from work. We leave with her driving and me in the passenger seat, of course, because it's her car. So I'm in the car with my girlfriend and we're leaving her father's office to go to Pittsburgh High School, and look at the cast list of The Crucible to see if I was cast in the play. It was exactly like the dream. The thing that separated this from your typical deja vu is that I had a witness. My girlfriend was with me when I had the dream, and I told her about it right after I dreamed it. Then, months later, she was with me again when the events seen in the dream occurred, and she remembered me telling her about the scene months prior. So I didn't just have some vague feeling that I had seen some event in a dream. I knew I had seen it in a dream. I remembered when the dream had been. I told someone else about the dream at the time. That person remembered me telling her about the dream, and that person was also with me when the events of the dream took place in real life. All the elements of the dream, which made no sense at all in June of 1986, turned out to make perfect sense in September of 1986. Because the details of my dream were both so specific and so unlikely at the time of the dream, random chance is a nearly impossible explanation. In my opinion, more impossible than some as yet unexplained glitch in the Matrix or other mechanism for seeing future events. I don't know exactly how, but I experienced some kind of wrinkle in time in 1986. I had just recently purchased my house, and my old washer and dryer wouldn't fit. Plus, they sucked, and my wife hated using them. So, she sent me on a mission to buy a new set. I did not do my research, and as I'm standing in the Lowe's appliance department coming to grips with what I'm up against, my contractor neighbor walked up behind me. He helped me pick out the exact units that I was going to purchase. I bought them, and then life got weird for a few minutes. When I got to the truck with my 2 large boxes, there stands my neighbor waiting for me. I thought he was waiting to help me load them, but he just looked at the boxes and said something like, "That's a gas dryer. You don't have gas." I bust his balls for a couple of moments about helping me pick the wrong units out, and it was as normal an interaction as I could have had. I went inside to do the return walk of shame on the items I literally never even left the parking lot with, and my neighbor walked to his truck. I'm at the return counter. The girl behind the register asked me my name. I told her and handed her my receipt from 5 minutes prior while explaining the situation. Without even looking up at me, she says again, "Name?" I tell her my name a second time, and she says nothing while typing into the computer. In comes my neighbor to the return desk with a gallon of paint. He waits in line behind me, saying nothing. The girl behind the register looks up at me and says, "Name, sir?" I tell her my name for the 3rd time, pointing to the receipt on the counter, and try to explain the situation again. And she types into the computer some more, and for what was probably a solid minute, says nothing at all. Another girl at the return desk finishes with another customer and comes over to help. The new girl says to me while they both stare into the computer screen, "Name?" A 4th time, I give them both my name. Without taking their eyes off of the screen, the new girl says, and I kid you not, "I'm sorry, sir, but you don't exist." I got sort of lightheaded after she said that, because I was already thinking how strange this was. I said back, "I don't exist, or I'm not in your system." Without answering me, the second girl says to my neighbor, "Sir, I can help you over here," and moves to the next register as my neighbor walks past me, and without another word to me, returns his paint and walks out the door. Then, almost as if nothing weird had happened, the first girl just says, "Well, here, my name. Here's your return. You'll have to purchase the new ones and we'll refund you for the ones you mistakenly purchased." Without even going back to appliances, There behind me stands a guy with the units that I needed on a dolly, ready to help me buy and load them into my truck. My neighbor was gone, but when I asked him about it, he didn't think there was anything weird about the whole thing. I, on the other hand, had an existential crisis, and I only barely managed to hold it together. Hey Raven, I have a glitch that I wanted to share with you that happened to me here only a couple of months ago, and it was seriously creepy to me, so hopefully you enjoy it. This happened on a family vacation / road trip a few months ago. This was our first trip since COVID started, and we were all very eager to escape the monotony of quarantine. We planned a weekend getaway, and I remember that all of us were super eager to get out and have a great time. The first day of the trip was pretty normal. A lot of fun times, a lot of fun memories between all of us. I guess I should mention that there was 4 of us. Myself, 16 and female, my mom and dad, and then my younger sister who was 9. It was a pretty long day though. So the hotel that my parents had booked was a welcoming warmth that made us feel right at home. Now, for this story to make sense, I kind of have to explain how the hotel room was set up. The room was painted a nice pastel blue. It was a really spacious and inviting room. It had 2 beds that had really pretty dark blue covers. It was a large enough room to have a couch that was also blue, off to the side facing the television. In the bathroom, there was this really large ornate mirror. Like it had a really pretty and fancy looking frame that it was around it. I remember looking at that mirror and thinking about how nice it was. And lastly, there was a TV mounted to the wall, above the desk that was in the room that was decently sized. After settling in, I pulled out my Nintendo Switch and I laid out on the couch to play some Animal Crossing. My sister was laying in our bed that we were supposed to share, and my parents were in the other bed. It was like 10 and they were all super tired, as was I, but I needed to take care of my island first. Yes, I have a problem. I got a little too involved in the game and started to doze off myself. Thankfully, I was awake enough to save my game, and after that, I literally passed out hard on the couch. This is where things go from this nice vacation evening to honestly terrifying. When I woke up, I felt disoriented and confused. And not the normal disorientation that happens when you wake up in a hotel room. When I opened my eyes, the first thing I saw was my sister in front of me. Not like standing in front of me, but lying on the bed. Because I was somehow in the bed. I thought, okay, maybe I got up in the middle of the night and got into bed and just don't remember. Maybe I sleepwalked or something. Weird, but not horribly alarming. Then it started to get alarming. When I finally got my eyes fully opened and was cognizant, I noticed that the blankets on the bed were no longer a nice blue. They were an ugly cream color. I tried to shake this off again, as maybe I just mistook what I saw. I was pretty certain that wasn't the case, but I had to just tell myself that and move on. I stood up, and I started walking towards the bathroom, when I noticed that where the couch was now a single black recliner. I paused and stared at this chair for several moments, trying to think back to the night before. I know for a fact I was lying on the couch, but yet now there was no couch. Just this black chair. And sitting right there in the chair was my Nintendo Switch. I looked to the wall opposite the chair, and there was a TV there, but it was no longer mounted. It was just sitting on top of a dresser. The desk was also gone. The last thing I noticed when I glanced over was the fact that the walls were no longer that inviting pastel blue. It was that cheap apartment tan color. This was the point where I started to have a mini panic attack. I could shrug off waking in the bed and nod on the couch. I could move past the color of the blankets being different, but a whole couch just not existing? That was too much for me. I sped up and ran into the bathroom to splash my face with water to try to keep myself calm. I did so just staring down at the sink and breathing, telling myself it was going to be okay. Then, I reached over to grab a towel and went to dry my face off, which is when I looked up at the mirror. That really nicely framed, ornate, decorated mirror was gone. And in its place was one of those flat, affixed to the wall with little clips, mirror slabs. The kind that are just a thin piece of glass and lay flat against the wall. I felt a painful chill run down my spine as I tried to make sense of what the hell I was seeing. Was I dreaming? Hallucinating? As cliche as it is, I actually pinched myself on the arm to see if I was dreaming. But it hurt, and reality didn't change. I actually stuck my head out and called out to my mom, and I asked her if she remembered the mirror in the bathroom. And she laughed and was like, "The mirror? What about it? It's a mirror." I mentioned the nice frame that was on it, and she just said, "No, it was just one of those cheap hotel mirrors." I then mentioned the couch, and she said, "You mean the chair? What about it?" Neither her nor my dad or sister recalled anything about the room from the night before. None of them thought the room looked any different. After a bit of me trying to say, "Hey guys, the room changed," I let it go, because none of them seemed to notice anything amiss. I just ate my breakfast in silence and packed up my stuff, ready to get out of this place. One last thing to note, I can perfectly visualize the original room. The blue walls, the blue blankets, the blue couch, the mounted TV, as well as that ornate mirror. I remember it all very vividly, and I was able to actually confirm that they did have a room that looked like that. We just didn't stay there. When we got back, I googled the hotel, and I checked out their website, and the demo room on the page was the exact room that I remembered. But it only had one bed. I showed my mom the picture of the bathroom and mentioned the mirror. She said it was nice, but that the hotel room we stayed in looked nothing like that. From what I found out on the website, this is what they are remodeling all the rooms to look like. Basically, they're upgrading things and making them look nicer. We had apparently stayed in a room that hadn't yet been updated. So, that's my weird story. It was really strange to me that the room does exist. That the hotel does have rooms that look like that. But it wasn't one that we stayed in. Why can I remember being in that room that we apparently were never in? The room will look like that in the future, as they are upgrading their rooms to be that style. So, did I shift to a timeline where that hasn't happened yet? I honestly have no explanation for this, and any thoughts would be more than welcomed. Hi, Raven. I've listened to the podcast for a very long time now, always thinking about submitting. But the question has always been, how do I choose just one? There's too much to tell in one story. Short version, I fought with the living glitch for most of my life. Bad, vile fighting. The sense of needing to be constantly on guard or regretting it when I let myself relax. Needing to always be alert to whatever new prank might come next. Forced into detective mode to figure out what new insane thing had just happened in order to fix it. Like firecrackers going off at random behind you, all the time. And the worst part is, feeling alone and dealing with it. No one else believes the firecrackers exist, so while you know that the events happen to you on a constant basis with such precise comedic timing as to cause maximum humiliation, and that you would know in your heart you're lying to yourself if you try to insist it was all just a string of several thousand coincidences. It doesn't matter. So, you have to keep your mouth shut. I have friends who are endlessly supportive of my mental or physical illness, but if I bring up the glitches, I either get a stony silence or a well-meaning but condescending explanation of why what I'm saying can't possibly be true. What I lived through can't be true, because they've never experienced it, therefore it's not real. It's hard when people who care about you otherwise will leave you feeling more alone than ever when you need them the most. I've been receiving mental health care since I was 4 years old. I've been on nearly every type of psychiatric medication that you can think of. Most have had no effect, or just drowsiness. I never black out. I never have missing time. I never hallucinate, visual or audio. I don't have schizophrenia. I don't have DID. I don't have alien hand syndrome. I have CPTSD for sure, plus bipolar and ADHD. I understand their symptoms. I manage them well, and they're not enough to account for the glitches. I keep notes, 150 pages of them. I'm cognizant of confirmation bias, and always tried to not include anything that was my own fault, or just bad luck. Sometimes I got so angry, those false positives crept in anyway. Yet there were plenty that, when I reread them, I'd feel my chest tighten. Things that could not have been caused by random chance, my own carelessness, or subconscious self-sabotage. It's a very strange emotion to feel simultaneous vindication and dread at the implications of having been right. My glitches tend to come in bunches that happen throughout the day, each one timed so that I won't be able to cool down from the previous one, inflaming my anger worse and worse and worse. Anger is misery. I've given myself a throat polyp from screaming. I've worried that I was on the verge of a heart attack. Imagine that you're trying to clean a floor and a cruel prankster keeps squirting ketchup on it. Every single time that you finish. But I doubt you want to hear a story about 50 small typos, flickers, stumbles, and nitpicks, so I'll tell you about the vacation incidents. I don't know how far back the pattern goes. The first one that feels right is when I was going to a large convention to meet 2 dear friends of mine who I had known online for 3 years. On the day that my train was scheduled to depart, I was walking out of a store that I'd been to hundreds of times and tripped on a 1-inch high curb. I fell and landed with my entire weight on the side of my right hand. The pain was incredible. My friends started rapidly driving me home while I sat in the passenger seat, going semi-deaf and semi-blind from shock. We called the EMTs, but after a short while, the pain was going down. Everyone around me sensibly recommended that I cancel the trip, and that I go to the emergency room. But I thought of the friends that I wanted to meet, and how this might be a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity. I chose to swaddle my hand and just go to the convention anyway. This was the right decision. Those friendships I made have been some of the strongest of my lifetime. And during the convention, my hand was in almost no pain at all. I had restricted movement, but it almost never hurt. I returned home with a wicked cold that didn't go away for 2 weeks. So I went to a doctor for some antibiotics. On a whim, I asked if he would x-ray my hand. Turns out, my 4th and 5th metacarpal bones were shattered like glass fluorescent light bulbs. In exchange for 2 lifelong friendships, the cost was 3 surgeries, a big, ugly scar, and an inability to curl my pinky. Good deal, in my opinion. That set the tone of a pattern. It went like this. Every time I would go on vacation to visit friends, something, quote, very special would happen right before I left. Sometimes a single big incident would happen during. But otherwise, all the hundreds of incidents that would drive me insane in my daily life would be gone during the duration of the trip. Gone. I cannot emphasize that enough. Like living in a room full of black smoke, and then visiting a place with fresh air for a week. Like having bad tinnitus vanish completely for 2 weeks before coming back again. I had suspected that it had an intelligence, but this pattern also suggested that it had a range. Or, as I came to consider, maybe certain people negated its effects. It could never stop me from going, but it could give me a nasty parting gift. Or keep one away from me. In preparation for another trip, where I would be on a train for 40 hours, I had bought myself a present to open on the ride. I collect Transformers, and this was a high-end third-party toy. I pre-ordered it with months to spare, but then the delays began. It was taking an unusually long time for this item to arrive at the online store. And then, it took an unusually long time for the store to ship my item out. I started feeling certain that, against all odds, the package would be delayed until the exact day after I left, because that would be, quote, funny. USPS took an unusually long time to ship the package. When it arrived at our post office, the day before I left, they somehow managed to lose it for 24 hours. I called, and it should have been on the truck out for delivery that morning, but it just wasn't. So, I left on my trip, and my family let me know the next day that it had arrived. So what, you might say? It's just a toy. It was safe and sound when I got home 2 weeks later. The point was that it kept something from me just to show me that it could. I should not have been able to predict this. It meant foreseeing delays at every single step of transit, each one less likely than the last, based on nothing more than I think some cosmic gremlin is screwing with me, and giving its sense of humor, this is what will happen. In no sane world should I have been so certain in my prediction. It would be easier if I was just crazy. With each trip, I got better and better at foreseeing and preventing things that could go wrong. Since I'd been bored stiff on the last 40-hour ride, when I visited those friends again, I brought my first laptop. I filled it with things to enjoy on the train. I got on board without incident. 8 hours in, the laptop gave me a battery low warning, even though I had plugged it into the outlet beside my seat. I looked at the clear plastic power cord, and there were little sparks of fire inside it. I had taken extensive precautions for the laptop itself. I never thought the cord would die. So, that left 32 hours of being glad that I brought some books along too. On another visit, my trip journal was erased. I keep one every time because my brain used to be very bad about remembering good memories, a consequence of too much time spent on the lookout for bad ones. So these journals were my memory. If someone erased one of them, that would be unforgivable. This one, I still don't know how it happened, but some kind of error caused the file to not just get deleted, but overwritten. So not even my friend who built my computer could find a way to recover it. This one did happen during the trip itself, but it fit the pattern of one big incident per trip and virtually nothing else. Another time, the whole morning screwed up. I'm unable to drive, so A family member was taking me to the train station. Somehow, despite us normally being very punctual, we both independently misremembered my departure time, meaning that we'd planned to give ourselves well over an hour to get up and get ready. That was now cut down to 15 minutes. And when we got outside, the Michigan winter had frozen the car door lock on my side of the door, so the door wouldn't stay shut. I had to physically hold it closed on the dry over, and then it took bungee cables to drive it back. When I was standing on the platform, I checked my watch, and it died when I looked at it. Another watch I bought at a drugstore outside the Chicago train station also died within a few hours of me putting it on. Then, I realized my wallet was gone. With the train due in 5 minutes, I retraced my steps, hoping I was right that I remembered leaving the house with it. I scanned my footprints in the snow, hoping no one picked it up and stole it, and then ran down the stairs to the parking lot to search the car. My wallet was underneath the seat. It had slid out of my pants by coincidence. Ha. I got back to the platform literally as the train was showing up. Another time, a friend showed up to drive me to their place, so I didn't have to deal with any trains. Why did I never go by plane, you ask? With my luck, I don't want to be cavity searched or crash into the ocean, thanks. So, getting there went smooth. We planned to go to a convention. My friend gave me the tickets, and I put them in my wallet for safekeeping. Then, a little later, I felt an impulse to take them out and stick them underneath a book. This was not a voice in my head, but more like a post-hypnotic suggestion. Like someone inserting a programmed response, making me feel sleepy enough to not pay attention to what I was doing and forget it afterwards. On the day of the convention, we were about to go in, and then the memory returned. My friends had to stand around waiting at the cafe, while I wasted $40 of my own money on a taxi ride back to the apartment to get the tickets. They forgave me, but I felt embarrassed as hell. This was not the first time I had had that dopey, just do it, don't think about it, it'll be fine feeling, which later turned out to be setting a trap. Do you see the personality that was emerging? It couldn't ever stop me, but it could throw a roadblock in my path. It's something to make me stumble. It's something to make it clear that I was not ever allowed to forget this thing existed. This last incident broke me. I knew the pattern by then. I'd spent years fighting this thing, figuring out its BS with inductive reasoning, and I was ready to go on one damn trip to meet a new friend, and have nothing go wrong this time. I prepared for everything. I don't want to relate every detail, but I made lists and contingencies. Absolutely everything I could possibly imagine going wrong. I cut off every single possible access point that it could have stuck its filthy little fingers into. So, the day came. My train was due in an hour. It was raining. I called a cab, not wanting to risk getting my luggage wet waiting for a bus. I stood on the porch. The taxi didn't come. I looked at my watch. Half an hour passed. Time was running short, and the taxi still wasn't showing up. I started calling the company repeatedly and getting no answer. 15 minutes, 10 minutes, 5 minutes. Too late. I forget when, but I finally made it through on the phone to the company. The driver's boss told me that the cab driver had gone missing and wasn't responding. He had gone missing. He wasn't responding to his radio, and they had no idea where he was. Do you understand that? I had planned for everything that could possibly go wrong, except for the one thing I had zero control over. I still have no idea what happened to that driver, and I really hope that he's alright. So that was when I first downloaded Lyft. I was able to get another station further along the train's path, and I went on the rest of my trip as planned. But I was ruined the entire time, unable to enjoy myself. I don't think that I was very good company. But how would you like to have inescapable proof in your life that magic is real, but only bad magic? The story does have a happy ending. Eventually. Years later. It turns out, if you keep fighting with someone long enough, you learn all their moves and they learn yours. And you both get so burned out that negotiations can finally begin. Maybe I'll submit that story too, but it'll be hard to figure out how to compress it. Anyways, have a good day, everyone. I've been reading the stories here for quite some time, and I finally decided to share my own bizarre and unsettling experience. Even now, years later, I can't fully explain what happened that day. Maybe someone out there will have experienced something similar, or will have an explanation beyond, it was a weird thing that happened, or it was just a glitch in the Matrix. But who knows? This glitch occurred during my sophomore year of college. At the time, I was living in an old, somewhat run-down dormitory with a reputation for being haunted. While I've never been a firm believer in the paranormal, I couldn't deny that the building did have a strange and eerie atmosphere. The narrow hallways were always dimly lit, the floorboards creaked, and it often felt like someone was watching you when you walked down the hall or into the stairwell. One day, I needed to go to the library to get a book for an upcoming assignment. I was needing to get it done pretty quickly, and the library was located in another building. So I had to go downstairs to get to the entrance. I had used these stairs many times before, and they were nothing out of the ordinary, just a typical old winding staircase that connected the dormitory to the ground floor. And there weren't a ton of floors in this building either. As I began my descent, I noticed that the staircase seemed to be a lot darker than usual. I figured that maybe some of the lights had burnt out or something, and I made a mental note to call it in to the maintenance staff. However, as I continued down the stairs, I began to feel a growing sense of unease. It was like the darkness seemed to always be at the bottom of the stairs as I went down. Like no matter how much I went down, I wasn't getting closer to it. I tried to shake it off and get to the bottom, and then it just started feeling weirder and weirder. The more I kept going down, the more it felt like I wasn't making any progress at all. Like the stairs just kept going and going. Like I said, there weren't that many floors in the building, and I wasn't even at the top level. So I knew for a fact that I had gone down way too many flights of stairs at this point. I was honestly starting to freak out. How was I still several floors from the bottom after having gone down numerous flights? My heart was starting to race, and I was feeling like I was trapped or something. I know that defies logic, but it honestly felt like I was never going to get to the bottom of the stairwell. The only conclusion that I could come to was, this is a glitch. This is something not working right in our simulation. I stopped on the stairs where I was. As I was about to descend, I took a deep breath, closed my eyes, and said out loud, I will get to the bottom. This is just a glitch. After a few moments of breathing and staring at the back of my eyelids, I opened my eyes and started back down the flight of stairs. Much to my surprise, everything was back to normal. I went down the few flights, and I was at the bottom. I got to the bottom and went out into the common area, and everything from there was honestly normal. I got my book, got back in, and I got back to my room without incident. I was, and am, still shaken by this whole thing. It was disorienting, and just really weird. Thankfully, I was able to focus my mind and get things back to normal, but that is a big question that I have about this. Did I somehow manifest the staircase back to normal? Did my words actually change the simulation and make this whole thing end? It was freaky. But if that's what happened, well, I have to admit that it was kind of cool. Thankfully, nothing like this has happened since, and it's just a really weird memory that I will always keep with me. I have a glitch that happened just last week. Something that genuinely made me feel a bit weird about myself. It was a pretty normal day, last Monday to be exact. I was on my way to work after a long but productive weekend, driving down a familiar highway that I've taken every day for too many years now. I head in just before the rush hour, but the highway is a state highway, not an interstate, so it's not usually terribly busy. So I don't see too many cars, but there are a few. I was lost in my thoughts, the hum of the engine and the voice on the radio keeping me awake, and focused on the road ahead of me. After a bit, I noticed a car a little ways ahead of me. It wasn't speeding or driving stupid or anything. It just looked a lot like an old car that I used to own about 10 years ago. It was definitely a cherry red 1998 Ford Escort. Intrigued, I sped up a little bit to get a closer look. As I neared it, I actually got kind of giddy to see that this car was identical to my old one. There was a small hole in the bumper where my dad had backed his trailer hitch into it. It had the same dumb bumper sticker that I'd put on it in college. I stared a bit longer, just kind of grinning and thinking, wow, 10 years later and I've run into my old car on the highway. What are the odds? How is that thing still running? Obviously, it's not impossible, but highly unlikely, right? Now, that part isn't the glitch. That part could easily just be a fun coincidence. The glitch happened when I pulled up closer to them to get a look at the driver. As I got closer, I could see the driver's face in the side view mirror, and my blood ran cold. The man driving the car was me. Not a look-alike. He didn't look just similar to me. He was me. Right down to the stubble on his face, the sunglasses perched on his head, and even the same mild expression. My mind kind of spun, struggling to make sense of this and making me feel dizzy. I'm pretty certain I wasn't hallucinating or anything, as I was feeling fine up to this point and I don't have anything wrong with me, or anything like that. I had somehow stumbled upon a copy of me that was driving my old car, which completely confused me. My mind immediately went to, I need to meet this guy. I need to know this copy of me. I tried to catch up to him, but as soon as I got around to the actual side of the car, he hit his signal and got over 2 lanes to take the exit. Weirder still, I know that exit. It's the exit that I would take to get to my previous job, because that office is literally to the left of the highway ramp. This guy, this version of me, was driving my old car and taking the exit that I used to take to my old job. From where I was, it would have been dangerous to force myself to take that exit, so I just had to let it go and watch this other me go off to live his life. I did drive down to where my old job was on my lunch break, which is silly, I know, but I wanted to see if my car was there. It wasn't, so no leads on that front, unfortunately. In the end, I was baffled. Was this some kind of timeline break? An alternate reality version of me where I never took this job and thus never sold that car and bought my current one? Am I going crazy? Is there lead in my water pipes? I don't know. What I do know is that it was really weird and uncanny, and I genuinely have no explanation for it, other than there is a second me, and that he has good taste in crappy cars from the 90s. This is one of many glitches I posted back in 2014 under a different username. I lived for 7 years in an apartment where a lot of crazy incidents kept occurring, and this wasn't the craziest, but it's probably the easiest to relay. This actually occurred either in the late 90s or early 2000s, back when ICQ and MSN Messenger were popular. I had popped downstairs for an apple and returned to my room to continue a chat, and I remember being oddly aware that the apple in one hand was forcing me to type one-handed. I mean, it was obvious it would, but it felt strange the way the consciousness of and cause of the impediment floated into my head, almost like an unconscious sign that I should take note. Then, literally, the next thing I was aware of was that I was typing with both hands. I immediately had a WTF moment. I know I couldn't have eaten the entire apple, core and all, because A, I was highly aware there is cyanide in apple seeds, and yeah, I now know that a few wouldn't hurt, but I didn't then. And then B, I have issues with texture and can't stand the texture close to the core, and it would automatically spit it out if I accidentally bit it. My mom used to complain about me wasting half the apple when I was a kid, so this wasn't a new quirk. Thinking maybe I had had some kind of spaced out moment and uncharacteristically tossed it in my wastebasket, I got up to check, even though I had no memory of getting up. Nothing. I went downstairs to check the trash. Nothing. Hell, I even went outside and hunted around the house because, at that point, I was convinced I must have spaced out and discarded it somehow, despite nothing of the sort being in my history. The idea of throwing trash out of a window is an abomination to me. I wasn't on any meds, didn't do any drugs, drank quite a bit on occasion, but never in the daytime. I was totally sober and clear-headed. When my boyfriend came home and I relayed the story, he also conducted a hunt for the missing apple with no luck. To this day, I have no explanation, but probably because I was so used to similar happenings, it just became one of those amusing mysteries I occasionally pondered, but am not particularly bothered by. Hey Raven, love your channel, and thanks for helping me sleep at night. I have a weird glitch/creepy story. I was in high school, and every weekend I would spend at my then-girlfriend's house. I spent so much time at their house that her mom would jokingly refer to me as her other son. Her mom was divorced and very independent. She was always running around working in her yard, cutting the grass, trimming the bushes, cutting down large tree branches, etc. Me being a tall guy, I used to help her around the house occasionally since my girlfriend's younger brother didn't want to help much. I will refer to her younger brother as Brandon. I felt obligated to help since I was always there and eating their food. It was the least I could do. One Saturday night, I was at my girlfriend's house and her mom came home with an excited look on her face. She was happy to see me there and asked if I wouldn't mind riding with her down the road to gather some big white rocks she saw piled up on the side of a dirt road. Her mom wanted to use the rocks to decorate a corner area in their backyard. Of course, I wouldn't say no, and I hopped to help her. Her mom then yelled for Brandon, who was upstairs, sealed away in his room, to come and help us. My girlfriend would stay home since her mom didn't want to have all of us tag along. We hopped in the mom's SUV. I sat in the front passenger seat and Brandon crawled in the back. Her mom put down all the seats in the back and laid a tarp over everything. We took off down the road, and the construction site was about 15 minutes away. It was late at night, midnight to be exact, and the mom was telling me and Brandon along the way that we should be careful not to get caught, which was funny because we were just taking rocks. The neighborhood was empty and dark, and looked like a tornado had torn through. The streets were covered in dirt from all the construction. The only thing standing was a few houses in the distance. It was dead silent as we parked the car on the dirt road, the only light being the headlights shining on the pile of big, chalky white rocks, and a few dimly lit streetlights in the far distance. We hopped out and started hauling the rocks into the back of the SUV. We loaded up a decent amount of rocks and made some jokes as we all hopped back in. I quickly jumped in the passenger seat, and we sped off. Once in the car, we all laughed and joked about the police chasing us down for stealing rocks from a neighborhood. My girlfriend's brother, Brandon, let out a loud laugh from the back seat as he seemed pretty hyped. We all had a clean getaway. The ride home was quick compared to the journey there. As we pulled into the driveway, the garage door slowly opened as my girlfriend stood there with a smile on her face. She quickly investigated the back seat to look at the rocks that we had taken. As she opened the back door, she says, "Hey, where's Brandon?" Her mom and I looked at each other and laughed and said, "He's in the back." My girlfriend, confused, then said, "No, seriously, where is he? Did he go in the house at the front door?" Me and her mom turned around very confused, and sure enough, in the back seat, it was just the chalky, white rocks. We all stared in disbelief at this pile of rocks. Her mom then said, "What the hell? Where did he go?" My girlfriend was convinced that we were playing some kind of prank on her. We all just looked at each other waiting for one of us to confess to playing the prank. We stayed in silence for about a minute, and then her mom's cell phone rings. It was an unknown number. She then looks at us in confusion and picks up the phone. She says, "Hello?" And we could faintly hear Brandon on the phone saying, "Mom, can you come and get me?" Her mom and I had chills running down our spines. We were so confused. Her mom then asks where he was, and he replied, "I'm at the construction site. Why did you guys leave me?" Her mom quickly hopped back into the car, heading back to the construction site, confused. I stayed back at the house with my girlfriend and explained the whole situation to her. The creepy thing is, me and her mom were carrying on a conversation with Brandon the whole ride back. I remember hearing his distinct laugh. It was a funny squeal-like sound that he would burst out with when excited. I heard that laugh from the back seat. My girlfriend's mom heard it too. So then, the question remains, who did we have a conversation with? Who did we hear laughing from the back seat? I ran things through my mind over and over, thinking that we made up the conversation with Brandon in our heads, possibly. But how did we both hear it? It turns out, we did leave Brandon by accident on that dark dirt road, unknowingly. Him being just as confused as us, having to walk to the nearest house and knock on the door at 1 a.m. in the morning asking to use the phone. The family then opened the door for Brandon and then called the cops. Rightfully so, since some teenager was knocking on their door claiming his mom left him in the middle of the night. The mom had ended up putting the rocks back and tried to explain to the police that it was an accident leaving her kid behind. I, to this day, have no idea who we were talking to that night. I remember Brandon boasting and laughing about how we had a smooth getaway. Well, it turned out to be a not so smooth getaway. I have never posted a story before, but I am a recent fan of Glitch in the Matrix stories. And I saw something last week that I feel like I simply cannot explain. This is the only place that I could imagine telling it. My boyfriend and I just returned from a 2-week-long desert vacation that included Bombay Beach, Joshua Tree, and Death Valley, among other places. We live in the south, so this was a big trip for us. Leaving the Death Valley area just after breakfast, we were driving through a tiny, desolate town. The only types of towns on this trip were either very small or completely empty. As we came to a corner, I saw a woman standing on the sidewalk on the left side of the car. I say that I saw a woman due to the femininity of the features. But what I actually saw was 2 long legs in black pants, with a shoulder and an arm directly atop the legs. There may have been a head, but if there were, it was facing down into the other side, so I could only see what I thought was a small bit of hair. The right arm, the only arm visible, was outstretched and completely parallel to the ground, and a medium-sized black purse was hanging awkwardly from it just above the elbow. Now, I understand that people are built differently, and not everyone will have the same physical makeup, but with the structure that I was seeing, there would literally be no way to house internal organs of any kind. This was different. Not only was there no torso, but I couldn't guarantee there was even a head. Without taking my eyes off of this sight, I said to my partner, in hopes that he was also seeing what I was seeing, "Is that a mannequin?" He replied, "God, I hope so." It was at that moment that the feet started to move and the legs propelled the woman forward, walking awkwardly, not bending the knees at all, purse still swinging from the arm, and it started walking towards the street, towards the car. Fortunately, we needed to make a right turn at that corner. As we did, I looked in the rear view, hoping to see a person simply unfolding and lifting their head to reveal a full structure of sorts, but I didn't. I only saw the same haunting figure, with no torso whatsoever, and only the potential of a head swaying behind it. I watched as long as I could and nothing changed. Still robotically walking forward, still just long legs and an arm with a purse. We've talked about this just about every day since it happened, and both of our stories are exactly the same. On the night of December 21st, I was in the basement watching a movie when my dad's phone started blowing up with calls. He was asleep, so I went up to see what was going on. It was my brother, and he had called multiple times. He had also called me multiple times, but my phone was on silent because of the movie, and because my fantasy hockey team's chat was super active and getting annoying. I called him back, and he said that he had been in an accident, and that he thought he was going to get a DUI. He was coming home from out of state, and I'm still not sure of the details. I guess that he had pulled off into a truck stop and police saw him not go through the wait station, so they stopped him. And at some point, he accidentally backed into a big rig. Nothing happened with actually backing up into the truck, just minor damage on his end, but he refused the field test and opted for a blood test, which he got, and he also got to spend a night and a half a day in jail. That is all really irrelevant and personal, so I'll spare the other details. Anyways, a week later, my dad gets a call from a random number. The person on the other end says, "Dad, I was in an accident." He said it sounded just like him. After some frantic calling, which he never picked up, we finally got a hold of his friend who knew where he would be working construction that day. My dad and my other brother decided to drive out there to see if they could find any sign of him in his truck. Remember, his previous accident is still fresh in everyone's head, so everyone was in a state of panic. They finally get to the job site and see him there. He has no idea what they're talking about when they tell him that they got a call from him saying he was just in an accident. He had not been in an accident, and had just been working all that morning. We were all baffled by what happened. Who called my dad's phone? The number just disconnects when called, but it's associated with the local mortgage company. Was it someone playing a prank? Was someone else actually in an incident and dialed the wrong number? Why did it sound like my brother? And why a week after all of that? We all find this extremely disturbing with the timings, so I guess that's my glitch. I'm not sure what to make of it, but I find myself entertaining the idea that it was a call from a different timeline or something. Also, I wasn't sure about adding this, but maybe this will just add to the strangeness. 7 years ago to the week, I saw a major car accident from a police chase, and then 2 years after that, which would be that same December week, I got into an accident with someone that same brother knew. It ended amicably, but the girl I hit said, "These things always seem to happen during the holidays." Because she had also been in an accident around that same exact time a year or so prior. Maybe this is all a bunch of coincidences, but I feel like that's a few too many. Hey Raven, long time no talk. I don't know if you remember me, but you read one of my stories back in October of, I think, 2023. It was a story about a time when I had to stay at a hotel in Overland Park, and I had a ghost basically jump scare me while I was watching something on TV about another ghost in Atchison. It was pretty meta, but it was a long time ago, so I forgive you if you don't recall it. I do. Well, I actually have another story for you, but this time it's a glitch, not a ghost story. A fact that I'm actually thankful for. So, this last February, my wife and I took a vacation to visit her family out in Sedona, Arizona. It was a nice trip. I soaked up the landscape and was loving the energy. My mother-in-law was ill, and she still kind of is, but she's doing much better. And while we were there to visit and help her parents out, we did do some of the vacation-y type of things, since we don't get a lot of time off. Near the end of our trip, we found this little shop that was tucked away, and I bought a souvenir. It wasn't tourist junk or anything. It was a small palm-sized piece of dark, polished basalt rock that had been carved into a simple spiral, like a miniature galaxy. I've been into space stuff since I was a kid, and something about it hooked me, so I bought it. It was fairly heavy, and I wanted to keep it on my desk at home as a bit of a paperweight and memento. We got home, and for about a month, that stone sat on the right corner of my desk in my office. I would pick it up, fidget with it while I was on a phone call, and set it back down. It was a fixture, and I liked having it there. Of course, as things happen, it starts to become part of the background. I got busy with work, had to go to another on-site in March, and when I got home, the rock was gone. I was cleaning my desk up after getting back, moved all of my papers and notebooks, and about midway through, I realized that it wasn't there anymore. I thought that it must have rolled off, or my wife had moved it for some unknown reason. I checked around the office, but I couldn't find it. My wife even helped me search, and together we tore up the office and all of the adjacent rooms, but it was nowhere to be found. It was small, sure, but it was also a rock, so it wasn't like we were looking for something super tiny and lightweight. It had heft. By the end of the week and 2 more searches through, deep cleaning the house, I had to just accept that the stone was gone, completely vanished. We both resigned ourselves to the idea that it had somehow ended up in the bin and was taken out, or fell into some crevice that connected to the void. I was disappointed, but I moved on. I didn't really have much of a choice. Fast forward to the beginning of September of this year, so about a month ago as of submitting this, and I had another on-site that I had to attend. And wouldn't you know it, I was the lucky one, once again, being sent to Overland Park, Kansas. Sidebar, I know you moved to Minnesota, but you mentioned that you knew the city, and I was curious if this place had some kind of rich supernatural history, because it always gives me the creeps. Not that I know. It's a pretty boring and standard suburb of Kansas City. Anyway, I had done what I always did, packed my gym bag with clothes that I needed, along with my networking tools, and drove them to the same hotel as last time. Not by choice. I got to the hotel, checked in for my 4-day stay, got to the room, and I unpacked everything from my bag. I'm the type that will take my clothes out and put them in the dresser that's in the hotel rooms, because it feels more organized. So, I completely and totally emptied my bag and tossed it onto the floor by the corner chair. I want to emphasize that a bit. It was completely empty and light, and I tossed it in the corner. I did the job, got everything working, and was there on the last night when I decided to go ahead and pack up so I didn't have to do it in the morning. I step over to the bag, pick it up, and immediately notice that there's some weight in the bag. I picked it up and placed it on the bed and then unzipped it, and there, sitting at the bottom, was my Sedona spiral stone. My breath hitched, and I think that I actually stumbled back a bit, thinking, there is no way on God's green earth. After a moment or two, I picked it up and thumbed the carved spiral just to confirm it was real and that I wasn't losing my mind. The jury's still out on that second half. My mind started spinning into these impossible scenarios. Did I somehow pack it? That wouldn't make sense. It had been missing for a few months, and the last place I saw it was on my desk, at home. Then, it disappeared, and that was that. I'm sure someone will say that I just left it in my bag when we came back from Sedona, but I want to say that that's also not possible. I didn't use this bag when I went to Sedona. This gym bag-like thing that I use for my clothes is specifically for work. I keep spare tools in it that I need for my job, so I don't take it unless I'm working. We took our actual suitcases to Sedona because we packed our clothes together and needed more space, so the stone was never in this bag after it was purchased. So, somehow, this stone had disappeared into the ether back in March, and decided to wait 5 months before it made a grand reappearance in my work bag, all the way in Kansas. The distance between my home and this hotel is close to 1,000 miles. So, I guess it took the long road here, 5 months to get 1,000 miles to its next destination. I guess I'm just glad that I was in the room when it reappeared, because if I hadn't been sent on this job, it may have rematerialized in that spot for someone else to find, and then they would have had another story to write into you. Anyway, that's my new story. It was weird, and I have no logical explanation. Maybe in 2 more years I'll have a third one for you. Just know that I'm still around and listening, and do enjoy the stories you read. Much love, Raven, and stay spooky. Well, I'm not sure what exactly this would fall under. I'm very skeptical of the Matrix hypothesis, but I do believe in the possibility of alternate universes. I've heard many people describe my situation as a form of quantum immortality as well, but that doesn't seem to fit right either. Here's my situation. I've seen my own death more times than I can count. The first and most frequent was when I lived in Federal Way, Washington. I didn't drive at the time, and I was walking to work. Suddenly, a garbage truck comes around the corner where I'm waiting to cross the street and drives by a little faster than it should be going. Nothing actually happened to me. However, the second the truck was past me, I suddenly had the memory and a slight physical sensation of the truck taking the corner way too fast and falling over sideways, and crushing me. It scared the crap out of me, and that particular scenario happened enough times to give me a phobia of garbage trucks. However, there have been more scenarios than that. One time I was exiting the store that I was working at early in the morning, and a plane fell out of the sky, crashing into the store from above. 3 days before Christmas. Another couple of times, my husband and I were on the bus to Seattle, and on the freeway, the driver had a heart attack and would either drive us into oncoming traffic or over the edge of a cliff. But every time this happens, I don't ever actually see it happening, like a lot of the people who claim the quantum immortality theory. It's almost as if a different version of me has died and their final memories get uploaded to my brain seconds after they die. For a while, the occurrences were happening very frequently. It was freaking me out. But they seem to have subsided a bit in the last few years, and I'm not sure if I'm just not dying as much, or if my connection to the other me's has gotten weaker. I've tried explaining this to my family and friends, and I'm sure they think I'm either making it up, or I've got something seriously wrong with me mentally. But thought the listeners here would understand what I'm going through.